Hello friends. Welcome to Fictional Vortex. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the legendary Super Saiyan. With the 6 eyes of God, the dragon's choice, Ophis and Tiamat. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Eye of the Maelstrom. The cold was a creature. It lived in the concrete, a patient, lithic predator that had been waiting for the warmth of a body. It coiled around Naruto's ankles where the standard issue pants ended, and it slithered up his spine. Nay, where his thin shirt was pressed against the wall. He did not shiver. Shivering was a waste of energy, an inefficient biological response to a simple environmental variable. His body, his true body, was a reactor of immense, near infinite potential. The cold of the room was a speck of dust on the surface of a star. He could incinerate the very air in the cell, melt the stone to slag, and walk away without a scratch. He could, but he wouldn't. Control was the first and final lesson. He sat on the floor, legs crossed, back perfectly straight. A single, naked bulb, humming with a low, weary frequency, cast a sterile white light from the ceiling, leaving the corners of the small, featureless cube in perpetual twilight. A steady drip, 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 from some unseen pipe served as the room's melancholy metronome, each drop striking the damp floor with a sound too loud for the confined space. For a normal child of 12, this would be a place of terror, sensory deprivation designed to break the will. For Naruto, it was almost peaceful. The simplicity was a relief. Out there, beyond the reinforced walls, the world was a screaming cacophony of information. A tidal wave of data that rashed against his mind every waking second. Here, in the quiet dark, he could finally process. He could finally see. His eyes, a blue so profound they seemed to capture the depth of the celestial abyss, were open. They were always open. Within those irises, a complex, 6-pointed pattern, a hexagonal mandala of impossible intricacy, pulsed with a faint, inner luminescence. The 6 eyes. They did not just see light or shape. They saw the world as it truly was. A grand, intricate tapestry woven from the threads of energy. He saw the concrete wall in front of him not as a solid barrier, but as a dense lattice of molecules, vibrating with thermal energy. He saw the stress fractures near the ceiling, microscopic fissures from the building settling, each one a testament to the slow, inexorable pull of gravity. He saw the chakra, humanity's life force, that had been infused into the seals etched within the walls, seals designed to suppress and contain. To his gaze, they were clumsy, thick lines of blue energy, like a child's crayon drawing compared to the elegant physics of the universe. He could see their trigger points, their flow regulators, the minute flaws in their application. He could unravel them with a thought. But he wouldn't. Control. Beyond the wall to his left, behind what a normal person would perceive as a one-way mirror, 2 men stood watching. The 6 eyes did not need light to penetrate the barrier. They perceived the energy signatures directly. One was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, a chakra network like old, smoldering embers, bright flashes of power choked by the gray ash of regret, weariness, and sorrow. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage. The old man's energy field was vast but frayed at the edges, like a once magnificent banner left too long in the wind. Naruto could taste the sentimentality wafting from him, a cloying, bitter sweetness. The other man was a void, a gravitational well wrapped in a human shell. His chakra was disciplined to an extreme, pulled so tightly inward that it barely had a presence. But Naruto saw what others could not. He saw the core of the man's being, a coiled, pressurized knot of venomous ambition and ice-cold pragmatism. The energy was stale, like air from a long-sealed tomb, tinged with the metallic scent of shed blood and the rot of decay from the man's augmented arm, hidden beneath his robes. Danzo Shimura. He radiated nothing but intent. A singular, obsessive desire for the object of his focus, the boy in the cell. Naruto tilted his head, the sound of the motion a faint rasp in the silence. He focused on their conversation, not by hearing the sound waves that failed to penetrate the wall, but by observing the subtle modulations in their chakra as they spoke. The intent, the meaning, was clearer than any spoken word. Too dangerous. Danzo. He is not a tool, Hiruzen projected, his chakra flaring with a weak burst of indignation, the embers glowing a dull orange. Danger that is not controlled is a liability. Danzo's signature retorted, remaining perfectly, unnervingly still. Danger that is understood and directed as an asset. The greatest asset the village could ever possess. This is not a punishment, Hiruzen. It is a necessary diagnosis. We must know the full extent of the anomaly. He is a child. A wave of sorrow from the Hokage. It felt pathetic. The Kyuubi was not a child. And what was awakened in him that day is far more than the fox, Danzo countered, a flicker of something akin to religious fervor pulsing from his core. You see a boy to be protected. I see the potential for a god to be harnessed. We cannot afford your sentimentality. The other villages grow stronger. The Akatsuki gather in the shadows. We have a divine weapon in our hands, and you would let it rust in a cage out of misplaced affection. Naruto let his focus drift from their silent argument. It was old. It was tired. They had been having this same debate since the day he had first opened his eyes in the hospital. Not crying like a newborn, but silently observing the world with a horrifying, adult clarity. He looked down at his own hands. He saw the thin layer of dead cells on his skin. He saw the pulsing network of chakra pathways beneath, a brilliant blue river system. And beneath that, deeper still, he saw it. The other power. If his chakra was a vast, deep ocean, this was something else entirely. A caged sun. A furious, incandescent energy that churned in the very core of his being, at a level deeper than genetics, deeper than spirit. It was a raw, screaming power that promised nothing but annihilation. It was golden, fierce, and utterly, terrifyingly chaotic. The rage of a forgotten warrior race, the legacy of a distant star, sleeping within his Uzumaki blood. The legendary Super Saiyan, the Kyuubi's malevolent chakra, sealed within him at birth, had not just made him a Jinchuriki. It had been the key, the percussive jolt that had turned the lock on two ancient, dormant inheritances. The six eyes had blossomed to perceive the cage. The golden rage had begun to rattle its bars. Every day was a battle. Every moment of anger, every spike of frustration, every sting of loneliness was a spark that threatened to ignite that sun. The six eyes were his only defense. They allowed him to analyze the rage, to understand its flow, to build psychic levees and dams to contain the golden flood. Control was not a choice. It was survival. His survival. The world's survival. A sharp clank echoed through the cell as a slot opened in the door. A tray was pushed through. On it was a single scroll. Naruto didn't move. He already knew what it was. He had perceived the intent of the guards outside, the orders flowing down from Danzo's position in the observation room. The final evaluation. Hiruzen's chakra sighed, a plume of resignation. The first step towards ascension. Danzo's pulsed, a cold, triumphant thrum. Naruto slowly rose to his feet. His movements were fluid, economical. Not a single twitch of wasted motion. He walked to the door and picked up the scroll. He didn't need to open it. The six eyes saw the chakra-laced ink through the parchment. Mandate. Proceed to Training Ground 44. Survive until dawn. Evasion is permitted. Engagement is authorized. This is a live fire exercise. Your objective is assessment. Their objective is subjugation. Subjugation. A polite word for capture and dissection, if Danzo had his way. The heavy locks on the door disengaged with a series of loud, metallic reports. The door swung inward, revealing a corridor lined with 4 Anbu. Their animal masks impassive, their chakra signatures disciplined and sharp. They radiated auras of nervous tension and professional readiness. They smelled of ozone and whetstone. Naruto saw the precise tension in their muscles, the way they held their ninjutsu, the subtle preparations they had made for genjutsu, ninjutsu, and taijutsu assaults. They were expecting a monster. They were expecting the Kyuubi's power to lash out. Naruto walked past them, the scroll held loosely in one hand. He ignored their presence as one would ignore furniture. They were variables in an equation, nothing more. He walked down the sterile corridors of the Anbu headquarters, a place no child should ever see. The air was thick with the ghosts of secrets and the lingering scent of blood that no amount of scrubbing could ever truly erase. He stepped out into the night. The promised drizzle was a reality, a fine mist that beaded on his bright blonde hair and kissed his skin with its chill. Konoha was asleep, a sprawling organism of wood and stone breathing softly under the bruised purple sky. He could see the intricate network of its barrier seals, a dome of faint green energy arching over the village. He could feel the collective unconscious of its sleeping inhabitants, a low hum of dreams and anxieties. And he could feel the hatred. It was a constant, background radiation. A low-grade poison in the air he breathed. The six eyes perceived it as a sickly, viscous, dark red energy that clung to certain parts of the village like a plague. It emanated from the civilians who had lost family in the Kyuubi attack. From the shinobi who saw him only as the demon fox reborn. He used to wonder at its intensity, at its irrationality. Now, he simply accepted it as another variable. Hatred was born of fear. And fear was born of ignorance. They were ignorant of what he was. He could not blame them for their faulty calculations. His escort led him to the massive, foreboding gates of Training Ground 44, the Forest of Death. The name was not an exaggeration. The forest was a self-contained ecosystem of predatory flora and fauna, a place where survival was measured in minutes. 2 Chunin guards at the gate. Their faces pale in the lantern light, recoiled as he approached, their chakra flaring with primal fear. They saw the Kyuubi. They didn't see the boy. Naruto's expression remained unchanged. The Anbu captain, a man with a weasel mask and a chakra signature that felt like honed steel, pointed a single-gloved finger into the oppressive darkness of the forest. Your destination is the tower at the center. Your time frame is 6 hours. Begin. Naruto stepped across the threshold. The moment he entered, the world exploded. The oppressive quiet of the cell was replaced by a sensory supernova. The six eyes, which had been in a state of passive analysis, were now flooded. He saw everything, not just the trees, but the entire life cycle of each tree, encoded in its very structure. He saw the flow of water from the rain-slick leaves, down the bark, into the root systems. He saw the vast, interconnected network of fungus beneath the forest floor, a subterranean brain communicating in slow, chemical signals. He saw every insect, every nocturnal creature, every bacterium. He saw the air itself, swirling currents of nitrogen and oxygen, laced with the thick, cloying energy of the forest's own malevolent chakra. It was a billion symphonies playing at once, and he was the conductor of them all. For a lesser mind, it would have been instantaneous insanity. For Naruto, it was simply Tuesday. He stood still for a full minute, his brain, augmented by the divine ocular gift, processing, filtering, and categorizing the torrent of information into usable data streams. He built a perfect, three-dimensional, real-time map of the entire training ground in his mind, accurate down to the last falling leaf. Then, he located his hunters. There were 12 of them. Root Anbu, Danzo's elite. They had entered from a different gate, their movements swift and silent, their chakra suppressed to the bare minimum. A normal sensor type would have been blind to them. But Naruto didn't sense chakra. He saw it. Their suppression techniques only made their signatures look like small, dark smudges against the vibrant, chaotic energy of the forest, making them even easier to spot. They were spreading out, forming a closing dragnet. A standard, effective tactic against a standard, effective target. Naruto was not a standard target. He analyzed their formation, the vectors of their approach, the subtle fluctuations in their chakra that betrayed their roles. 4 scouts on the perimeter, 4 trap specialists laying down seals and wires, and a 4-man command squad, led by the captain, moving towards the center to intercept. Let the test begin, Naruto thought, a cold, clinical curiosity stirring within him. He felt no fear, no anger, only a detached interest in the proceedings. He turned his attention to the nearest scout, a smudge of dark energy perched in the high branches of a massive, ancient oak 300 meters to his northeast. The root agent was a professional. His breathing was slow and controlled. His heart rate was low. He scanned the forest below with practiced eyes, his senses sharp. He was listening for a snapped twig, watching for a flicker of movement. He was looking for a child. He had no conception of what was looking back at him. Naruto's eyes traced the path of a single raindrop as it collected on a leaf high above the scout. He calculated the weight of the water, the tensile strength of the leaf's stem, the air resistance, the wind vector. He saw a beetle crawl onto the same leaf. Its added weight was the final, minute variable required. With a gentle pulse of his own chakra, no larger than a whisper, he nudged a current of air upwards. The minute shift in pressure was enough. The beetle lost its footing. The leaf dipped. The heavy raindrop fell. It struck another leaf, which struck a small, dead branch. The branch, rotten and precarious, snapped. It fell, striking a larger, heavier branch below it with a sharp crack. The scout's head snapped towards the sound. His training taking over. It was a classic misdirection, and he knew it. His eyes scanned the opposite direction, expecting the real attack from there. He was half right. It was a misdirection, but the attack was the misdirection itself. The larger branch, dislodged by the first, swung down like a scythe. It was 2 meters long and as thick as a man's thigh. It crashed into the scout's position with the force of a battering ram. There was a sickening crunch of bone and a strangled cry, instantly cut short. The scout's chakra signature flickered violently and then vanished, snuffed out like a candle. 1 down. No contact. No visible trace of his involvement. From the perspective of the other root members, it was a freak accident. A danger of the forest. But they were professionals. They would be more cautious now. Naruto moved. He didn't run. He flowed through the forest, his feet never making a sound on the wet mulch. His 6 eyes provided him with the perfect path. A corridor of absolute safety through the treacherous terrain. He avoided the grasping roots, the poison-thorned vines, the layers of oversized centipedes that he could see coiled and sleeping in the earth beneath him. He approached the area where the trap specialists were working. He saw their work with perfect clarity. Chakra-laced wires, nearly invisible to the naked eye, were strung between trees. Connected to explosive tags and nets. Pressure-sensitive seals were buried under the loam. He saw the intricate flow of energy, the trigger mechanisms, the intended blast radiuses. He walked through the minefield as if it were an open field. His path was a complex, meandering dance, his feet landing in the only safe spots, sometimes with only a millimeter to spare. He passed by one of the specialists. A man with a boar mask, who was carefully burying a paralysis seal. The man was so focused on his work, so confident in his stealth, that he never once looked up. Naruto was a ghost, a whisper of displaced air. He stopped behind the man. He could have ended him in a dozen different ways. A strike to the neck. A disruption of his chakra flow. Instead, he reached out and plucked a single, explosive tag from the ANBU's own pouch. The movement was so swift, so silent, the man felt nothing. Naruto continued his silent journey, leaving the trap layer to his work. He found the man's partner a short distance away, setting up a wire snare. With another pulse of his chakra, infinitesimally small, he altered the tension on the wire the man was holding. The trigger mechanism, calibrated for a much heavier weight, clicked prematurely. The boar-masked Anbu heard the click. He had just enough time to look up, his eyes widening in confusion behind his mask, before the paralysis C.L. he had just buried activated at his feet. His body locked up instantly, his muscles seizing. At the same moment, the wire snare his partner had been setting whipped upwards, catching the partner by the ankle and hoisting him into the air. And then they saw the final piece of Naruto's work. The explosive tag he had stolen, he had subtly affixed to the snare wire. As the second Anbu was jerked upside down, the tag was pulled directly into the path of a tripwire connected to a volley of Senbon needles. The tag detonated. The explosion was contained but powerful. It shredded the nets and wires in the immediate vicinity. The concussive force knocking both the paralyzed Anbu and the ensnared one unconscious. Their chakra signatures dimmed to a low thrum. 2 more down. Their own traps, their own equipment, turned against them. The remaining 9 members of the Dragnet now knew. This was no accident. They were being hunted. Naruto felt the shift in their energy. The professional caution curdled into genuine alarm. Their movements became more erratic. They began to converge, abandoning the Dragnet for a wolfpack formation. Their chakra flared with bursts of adrenaline and anger. The command squad leader, the weasel-masked captain, sent out a pulse of chakra, a signal to regroup. Naruto was already waiting for them at the rally point. He stood in the center of a small, moonlit clearing, the drizzle creating a shimmering halo around his silhouette. He made no effort to hide. The time for subtlety was over. Now, it was time for a different kind of demonstration. The remaining 9 root Anbu materialized from the trees. Surrounding him, they moved with lethal grace, their blades drawn, their stances low and ready. The air grew thick with their combined killing intent. It was a palpable force, enough to make a veteran Jonin freeze. Naruto felt it as a pressure against his own energy field, an abrasive, irritating friction. For the first time, a flicker of something other than calm calculation stirred within him. Annoyance. They were still treating this as a hunt. They still saw him as prey to be cornered. They could not comprehend the sheer, unscalable gulf between them. This annoyance was a dangerous spark, and he could feel the caged sun in his gut begin to warm. A faint, almost imperceptible golden tint bled into his blue aura, so subtle that only his own 6 eyes could perceive it. Control. He took a breath, the cold, damp air a bomb on the inner fire. He forced the golden energy back down, compressing it, containing it. The Weasel Captain took a step forward. Uzumaki Naruto. By order of Lord Danzo. You will stand down and surrender for assessment. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Do not resist. His voice was a low, synthesized rasp from his mosque's voice changer. Naruto's gaze swept over them. He saw it all. He saw the captain's plan in the subtle tensing of the Anbu to his left. They would initiate with a volley of drugged kunai. He saw the hand sig. The two in the back were already preparing a large-scale Earth-style jutsu to trap him. He saw the faint traces of a fast-acting poison on the captain's own blade, a toxin designed to attack the nervous system. He saw their teamwork, their strategy, their every possible move and counter-move, laid out before him like the schematics of a simple machine. Outnumbered, outmatched. The words were so fundamentally incorrect, so far from the reality of the situation, that it was almost humorous. He decided to speak, his voice quiet but carrying with unnatural clarity through the clearing. Your formation is flawed. The captain flinched, an almost imperceptible reaction. What? The two ninjutsu specialists in the rear, Naruto continued, his tone flat, analytical. You've positioned them too close together. A single, wide-angle attack would neutralize both of them before they could complete their sequence. Your flankers are too far forward, leaving your rear vulnerable to a circular counterattack. The poison on your blade is impressive, but its effective dispersal range in this humidity is less than 1 meter. You would have to get closer than your own protocols recommend. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. You are not hunting me. You are trapped in here with me. The sheer audacity of his statement, delivered with the calm certainty of a scholar correcting a student's math, broke their discipline. The captain snarled. Now. The forest erupted. Kunai flew, the earth churned, and 4 of the Anbu blurred into motion, charging from 4 different directions. It was a well-rehearsed, overwhelming assault designed to shatter a target's concentration. But Naruto's concentration was absolute. The world slowed to a crawl. The 6 eyes processed every variable. The trajectory of each kunai. The molecular composition of the rising earth wall. The footfalls and muscle contractions of the charging shinobi. He didn't dodge. He simply moved. A slight tilt of his head to the left. And 3 poisoned kunai passed by, their paths so close they ruffled his hair. A half step forward, and the earth prison erupted behind him, enclosing nothing but empty air. His right hand came up, palm open. He didn't block the Anbu charging from the front, but gently redirected the man's wrist, using his own momentum to send him spinning into the path of the Anbu charging from the right. The two collided with a grunt of pain and a clash of ceramic masks. His left hand moved, plucking a kunai from the air. He didn't throw it, he simply flicked it, a small, precise motion of his wrist. The kunai shot through the air, not at an enemy, but at a tree branch far above. It struck the wood with a thunk. The branch, weakened by his earlier accident, snapped and fell directly on to the 2 ninjutsu specialists in the rear, who were still trying to form hand signs. A crash and 2 muffled groans confirmed their neutralization. In the space of 3 seconds, a 4-pronged assault had been dismantled. And 4 more agents were out of the fight. Only the captain and 2 others remained. They stood frozen, their killing intent replaced by a wave of disbelief and cold, primal fear. Naruto stood in the same spot he had started, not a single drop of rain out of place on his jacket. He hadn't used a jutsu. He hadn't flared his chakra. He had simply used his perfect perception of physics and motion to turn their own attack into a chaotic, self-defeating mess. This test is over, Naruto said, his voice still devoid of emotion. He took a step forward. The remaining 3 Anbu took an instinctive step back. Their auras, once sharp and confident, were now flickering with the gray static of terror. They were looking at him now and they were not seeing a boy. They were not seeing the Kyuubi. They were seeing something else entirely. Something alien. Something impossible. He walked past them, heading towards the tower that was his supposed destination. He didn't even spare them a glance. They were irrelevant. The demonstration was complete. Danzo had his diagnosis. As he walked away, he reached into his pouch and pulled out the masks of the first 3 Anbu he had taken down. He had collected them without anyone noticing. He tossed them onto the ground at the captain's feet. They clattered on the wet earth, a final, damning statement. He reached the tower at the center of the forest just as the first hints of dawn began to bleed through the canopy. He did not enter. He simply stood before it, waiting. A few minutes later, the third Hokage appeared in a swirl of leaves. His face a mask of profound gravity. Danzo was not with him. Hiruzen looked at the boy before him. Unharmed, unruffled, his clothes were barely even damp. He looked at the boy's eyes, those impossible, terrifying blue eyes. And for the first time, he truly understood the depth of his failure. He had spent years trying to give this boy a normal childhood, trying to protect him from the village's hatred and from men like Danzo. It had been a fool's errand. You cannot put a leash on a typhoon. You cannot build a playground for a god. Naruto, Hiruzen began, his voice hoarse with emotion. He has the data he requires. Naruto stated, cutting him off. It wasn't disrespectful, merely factual. He will now escalate his plans to control me. You will try to mitigate them. The dynamic remains unchanged. The old Hokage flinched as if struck. The boy spoke of the clandestine power struggles of the village's leadership as if he were discussing the weather. What are you? Hiruzen whispered, the question that had haunted his dreams for 12 years. Naruto looked at the Hokage, and for the first time, a flicker of something that might have been pity entered his gaze. He saw the old man's aching bones, his weary soul, the immense weight of the hat he wore. I am a solution, Naruto said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. To a problem you have not yet understood. He turned and began the long walk back towards the village gates, leaving the Hokage standing alone in the shadow of the tower, the morning mist coiling around his feet like shackles. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the man they called the god of shinobi, had never felt so utterly, hopelessly mortal. The child he had tried to protect was gone. In his place stood something else, an entity of calm, calculated power whose depths he could not fathom, and whose future would shape the world far beyond the walls of their small, insignificant village. The maelstrom was contained, for now. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that one day the storm would break. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A serpent's gaze, a dragon's pride. The aftermath of the test in Training Ground 44 did not bring punishment or praise. It brought something far more unsettling, a change in the silence. Before, the silence in Naruto's minimalist, village-provided apartment was one of neglect. It was the quiet of being forgotten. A hollow space filled only by the low hum of the building's infrastructure and the distant, muted heartbeat of Konoha. Now, the silence was one of observation. It was the heavy, weighted quiet of being watched, of being measured. Naruto sat on his bed, the thin mattress doing little to cushion him from the hard wooden frame. Dawn had broken hours ago, painting the sky outside. His window in hues of gray and soft rose, but he had not slept. Sleep was a biological necessity he catered to, but rarely a state of true rest. His mind was always working, the 6 eyes always perceiving. He could see the Anbu guard posted on the rooftop across the street, a small, disciplined flicker of chakra trying to be invisible. He could see the microscopic surveillance seals, newer models than the ones in the interrogation cell. Woven into the plaster of his walls, their energy pathways glowing faintly like dormant circuits. They were all part of the new equation. Danzo had his data. He old war hawk had seen a glimpse of the abyss and, rather than recoiling, had begun drawing up blueprints for a bridge. Hiruzen, in turn, had doubled the invisible guardrails, his fear manifesting as a smothering, paternalistic surveillance. They were 2 old men playing a game of Go on a board that was already floating in the middle of the ocean, unaware of the leviathans stirring in the depths. Their actions were predictable, their motives transparent. What concerned Naruto was the variable he could not fully quantify, himself. The flicker of golden rage in the forest had been more intense than ever before. For a fraction of a second, the annoyance at the root agent's arrogance had almost given the caged son a foothold. He had felt the exhilarating, terrifying promise of its power, a power that didn't care for precision. A power that wanted only to break, to shatter, to burn. He had suppressed it, his control absolute even at the edge of the precipice. But for the first time, he understood that passive containment was not a permanent solution. A dam can hold back a river, but it cannot calm the storm that feeds it. He needed to understand the golden energy. Not just contain it, but communicate with it. He needed to map its contours, learn its language, and discover its origin. The Kyuubi, Kurama, was a source of information, but a biased one. The great fox, sealed within him, regarded the Saiyan energy with a mixture of awe and instinctual fear. It is the roar of a dying star, Kit, the fox had rumbled in the depths of their shared mindscape. It is not of this world. It does not obey the laws of chakra. Be careful it does not consume you from within. Naruto closed his eyes, though it made no difference to his perception. He extended his senses, not just within the confines of his apartment or the village, but outward. The six eyes were not merely a tool for sight, they were a divine instrument for perception on a planetary scale. His consciousness expanded, soaring above Konoha. He saw the land of fire as a massive tapestry of energy. The bustling towns were bright clusters of human chakra, the great forests were oceans of green life force, and the rivers and mountains were ley lines. Arteries of natural energy that crisscrossed the continent. He was searching for a specific resonance. A place where the natural energy of the world was both immensely powerful and uniquely aligned with the faint, residual signature of his own bloodline. The Uzumaki clan, masters of sealing arts and possessing titanic life forces, had not originated in the land of fire. They were refugees, their homeland of Uzu no Kuni destroyed long ago. But their roots went deeper. He filtered the cacophony of global energy, searching for a specific frequency, a harmonic that felt like home. His senses swept across the deserts of the land of wind, the frozen peaks of the land of iron, the dense jungles of the south. Nothing. Then he turned his attention eastward, past the land of hot water, towards the vast, fog-shrouded expanse where the continent frayed into an endless network of islands and marshlands. And there, he found it. It was a point of incredible energy concentration. A place where the planet's ley lines converged, creating a vortex of raw, untamed natural power. But it was more than that. Woven into the fabric of that vortex was a faint but unmistakable echo of Uzumaki chakra. Ancient and powerful, it was a place of power, a place of his ancestors. It was the perfect laboratory. He opened his eyes. The decision was made. Slipping out of Konoha, the most heavily fortified shinobi village in the world, was a trivial matter. The Anbu on the roof was watching the window, not the wall. Naruto phased a tiny amount of his chakra through the plaster, enough to disrupt the surveillance seal's monitoring loop, feeding them a static image of him sitting on his bed. He then walked to the wall, and with a precise application of the principles of energy manipulation that the six eyes made intuitive, he simply stepped through it. He didn't teleport. He found the infinitesimal spaces between the molecules and passed through them, emerging into the alleyway behind his building without a sound, without disturbing a single mote of dust. The barriers of Konoha, designed to stop armies, were irrelevant when you could perceive the keyhole in every lock. The journey took him 2 days of relentless, high-speed travel. He moved through the world like a phantom, a blur in the periphery of society. He saw caravans on the road, their merchants and guards radiating auras of greed and weariness. He saw shinobi patrols, their chakra sharp and disciplined. He saw villages, each with its own unique energetic fingerprint. He observed it all, catalogued it all, and remained unseen. As he neared his destination, the landscape began to change. The firm earth gave way to soft, wet ground. The great forests thinned, replaced by gnarled, twisted trees draped in thick curtains of moss. The air grew heavy, thick with humidity and the smell of salt, wet earth, and decaying vegetation. He had entered the great marshlands, a place largely untouched by human civilization. Finally, he arrived, In the center of a vast, misty lagoon, rose a small island, and upon it stood the crumbling ruins of a great stone shrine. It was ancient, far older than Konoha. The architecture was stark, powerful, and unmistakably Uzumaki. Great stone torii gates, their red paint faded to a pale pink, stood askew, half swallowed by the marsh. The central building was a pagoda of black stone, its roof sagging. Its walls covered in intricate carvings of spirals and vortices, the clan's symbol. Faded, almost completely eroded fuinjutsu formulas were etched into every surface. A silent testament to the power that had once been wielded here. The air itself was vibrating. The natural energy was so dense, so potent, it was like breathing in pure life. Naruto stepped onto the island, his feet sinking slightly into the soft, damp soil. He could feel the residual energy of his ancestors all around him, faint whispers on the wind. It was a place of immense power, a place of deep solitude. A place where he could finally turn his gaze inward without fear of interruption. He found the centermost point of the shrine, a large, flat stone dais that overlooked the misty lagoon. He sat, crossing his legs, his posture perfect. The ambient noise of the marsh, the chorus of insects, the croak of unseen frogs, the gentle lapping of water, was a soothing symphony. He allowed his 6 eyes to absorb the environment, to map every ripple in the water, every strand of moss, every particle of pollen drifting in the thick air. Then, with the external world fully catalogued and relegated to the background of his consciousness, he plunged inward. He descended past his vast ocean of blue chakra, past the malevolent, caged entity of Kurama, and focused on the core. On the golden sun, he did not try to force it or command it. He approached it as a scholar approaches a new, cosmic phenomenon. He extended a single, infinitesimally thin thread of his consciousness, a probe woven from the 6 eyes' own divine energy, and gently touched the surface of the golden sphere. The contact was explosive, not in a physical sense, but in a conceptual one. A wave of pure, unadulterated emotion washed over him, rage, pride. The thrill of battle, the sorrow of a lost home, the echo of a billion warrior souls screaming across eternity. It was overwhelming, but the 6 eyes held. It absorbed the data, categorized the emotions, and began to map the energy's structure. It was not like chakra, which was malleable and could be molded into 1,000 different forms. This power had only one form, one purpose: to expand, to dominate, to destroy. Carefully, he drew upon it. Not even a full percentage. A tiny fraction of a fraction. He pulled a single, golden thread from the raging sun and allowed it to manifest outside his body. The effect was instantaneous and profound. The air around him did not explode, it shimmered. Reality itself seemed to warp around the single, golden thread of energy. The buzzing symphony of the marsh faltered. The natural energy of the ley lines, which had been flowing in a smooth, powerful vortex around the island, suddenly recoiled, shying away from the pinprick of alien power as if from a plague. It was a fundamental disturbance. He had introduced a cosmic prime number into the neat mathematics of his world. A note of pure chaos into a world of order. And across the infinite dimensions, something heard it. The first indication was not a sound or a sight, but an absence. The constant, low-level hum of the marsh's life force, the chorus of a million living things, abruptly ceased. A perfect sphere of absolute silence expanded from a point in the humid air directly in front of Naruto. It was not the absence of sound, it was the active, aggressive negation of it. The very vibrations of the air molecules were stilled. The light seemed to bend around its edges, creating a strange, lensing effect. From the center of this void, a figure emerged. It was a young girl, small and slender, with long, dark hair and Gothic-style clothing that seemed oddly out of place in the primeval marsh. Her eyes were dull, lifeless, yet seemed to see everything. Her expression was one of absolute neutrality. Naruto's 6 eyes, which could deconstruct the anatomy of a god or map the flow of time, struggled to perceive her. She was a paradox. Where every other living thing was a source of energy, a font of chakra or life force, she was a sink. A hole in the fabric of existence. Her presence subtracted from reality. Looking at her was like looking at a patch of the sky where the stars had been erased. Her name, her very concept, echoed in the space she occupied: Ophis. The Ouroboros dragon. The dragon god of infinity. She drifted closer, her feet not touching the ground, and came to a stop a few meters from him. She did not speak. She simply observed him, her gaze fixed on the single, shimmering golden thread of energy that still pulsed between his fingers. He could feel her aura, which was not an aura at all but a powerful sense of curiosity, a pure, intellectual desire to understand the phenomenon she was witnessing. He had created a concept, infinity bound within a mortal shell, that she, the embodiment of infinity, could not immediately comprehend. The silence between them stretched, a comfortable, contemplative quiet that was a universe away from the oppressive silence of his Konoha cell. For the first time in his life, Naruto felt as if he were being looked at not as a weapon, a demon, or a child, but as an interesting new theorem waiting to be proven. And then the silence was shattered. It began as a low tremor in the earth, a vibration that rattled the ancient stones of the shrine. A pressure wave, immense and suffocating, washed over the island, making the very air feel thick and heavy. The sky, which had been a placid, misty gray, began to darken, swirling into an angry vortex of black and deep blue clouds. A storm was brewing, but it was no natural weather pattern. This was the herald of an arrival. Naruto calmly retracted the thread of golden energy back into himself, the external disturbance gone. But it was too late. The call had been answered. From the heart of the storm clouds, a figure descended. It was not a gentle drift like Ophis's arrival, it was a controlled plummet, a meteor striking with intent. A being of immense size and power slammed onto the far side of the island, the impact shaking the very bedrock and sending a shower of mud and water into the air. As the spray settled, he saw her. A dragon, but also a woman. She stood in a humanoid form, tall and regal, with flowing, aquamarine hair that seemed to move like water. She was clad in intricate, scale-like blue armor, and from her back, vast, draconic wings were spread wide, casting an intimidating shadow over the ruins. Her eyes were golden slits, burning with ancient power and incandescent fury. Her entire being radiated an aura that was the polar opposite of Ophis's void. It was a raging tempest of draconic magic, a storm of pride, power, and a deeply seated, centuries-old rage. He could see the intricate flow of a unique energy within her. A power he had never encountered before. It felt like crystallized karma, a power born of cause and effect, of balance and retribution. Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, one of the 5 great dragon kings. Her furious, golden gaze swept over the island, ignoring Ophis completely, and locked onto Naruto. Her voice, when she spoke, was not a shout, but it carried the weight and authority of a monarch, echoing across the lagoon with thunderous power. "You, boy," she commanded, her voice laced with an aristocratic, almost draconic hiss. The energy I sensed, it carried the signature of chaos karma. That is a power unique to my brood. A significant portion of my horde, my very essence, was stolen from me eons ago. Explain yourself. Are you the thief, or merely the inheritor of a thief's spoils? Your answer will determine if I merely destroy you, or if I erase your very existence from the annals of time. Ophis turned her head slightly, her gaze shifting from Naruto to Tiamat, a flick of something that might have been mild annoyance in her otherwise placid eyes. The dragon's loud, ostentatious arrival had disturbed her silence. Naruto remained seated, his posture relaxed, his expression unchanged. He looked at the furious Dragon King, his 6 eyes deconstructing her power, analyzing her emotional state, and cross-referencing her words with the sensations he had felt when he touched the golden energy. There had been a trace of something, a chaotic, retributive echo within the Saiyan power. An anomaly. He did not feel threatened. He felt intrigued. My power is my own, Naruto stated, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the Dragon King's oppressive aura. I have stolen nothing from you. Tiamat let out a derisive snort, a sound like grinding stone. Insolent whelp, do you think you can lie to me? I can smell the stench of my stolen power on you. I will tear it from your soul myself. Her wings beat once, a hurricane-force gust of wind that ripped leaves from the trees. She opened her mouth, and a swirling vortex of brilliant blue and gold energy began to gather, the air crackling with its raw power. It was an attack designed to obliterate mountains, a torrent of pure chaotic energy. Naruto did not move. He did not raise a hand to form a seal. He did not gather chakra for a defensive jutsu. He simply watched the attack build, his six eyes analyzing its composition, its rotation, its energy density. As Tiamat unleashed the blast, a roaring beam of annihilation that tore a trench in the ground as it shot towards him, he performed a single, subtle action. He activated his infinity. It was not a wall. It was not a barrier. It was a paradox made manifest. An infinitesimally thin, yet infinitely dense, layer of his own chakra projected into the space directly in front of him. The concept was simple. Anything that approached him would slow down, the distance to its target becoming infinite. The Dragon King's apocalyptic breath attack, a force that could shatter continents, slammed into the space before Naruto, and stopped. It did not explode. It did not splash against a shield. It simply slowed. The roaring torrent of energy, meters from his face, was now crawling forward at the pace of a snail. The individual motes of chaotic energy were visible to him, their violent dance reduced to a slow, elegant ballet. He could reach out and touch it, if he so chose. The universe's most powerful attack had been rendered utterly, completely impotent, halted by the mathematical absolute of a god's eye. Tiamat's golden eyes widened in shock, her conic arrogance momentarily replaced by sheer disbelief. She poured more power into the blast, the ground around her cracking under the strain, but it made no difference. The attack crept forward at an infinitesimal pace, forever approaching, but never arriving. What is this sorcery? She snarled, cutting off the attack. The energy dissipated with a final, angry crackle. Naruto lowered his invisible defense. It is not sorcery. It is control. Enraged by his calm, by the casual negation of her power, Tiamat abandoned magic and resorted to physical might. With a roar that shook the heavens, she lunged. Her form blurred, crossing the distance between them in an instant. Her claws, each one the size of a sword and capable of rending steel, aimed at his heart. To her, she was moving at impossible speeds. To Naruto, she was moving through molasses. The six eyes saw every muscle twitch, every shift in her center of gravity, the precise trajectory of her claws. He still didn't move from his seated position. As her claws were a centimeter from his chest, he raised his right hand. He didn't block the strike. He met her wrist with two fingers, applying a precise, minuscule amount of force a specific nerve cluster he had identified. Tiamat's arm, backed by the strength of a Dragon King, went completely numb. The momentum of her charge, no longer directed, carried her past him. She stumbled, her perfect, regal assault turned into a clumsy trip. She spun around, her tail, a massive, armored limb capable of leveling buildings, whipping towards him in a deadly arc. Naruto leaned back, the tip of her tail scything through the air where his head had been a moment before. He then pushed off the ground with one hand, a single, fluid motion that flipped him over the lashing tail. He landed softly on his feet behind her, his back to her. "Your movements are inefficient," he said, his voice still maddeningly calm. "You telegraph your intent with excessive rage. Your power is immense, but your application is unrefined." Tiamat froze, her back to him. She was breathing heavily, not from exertion, but from sheer, unadulterated shock and fury. She, one of the 5 great Dragon Kings, a being of immense pride and power who had lived for millennia, had just been effortlessly neutralized and critiqued by a silent, unknown boy. She had been made to look like a fool. It was a humiliation more profound than any defeat in battle. She slowly turned around, her draconic aura suppressed, her rage banked into a cold, dangerous fire. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a wary, dangerous curiosity. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not a boy, but an enigma. Something ancient and powerful looked back at her from behind those impossible blue eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice no longer a command, but a genuine, mystified question. Naruto met her gaze without flinching. Before he could answer, the small, quiet girl who had been observing the entire exchange spoke, her voice a soft, monotone whisper that seemed to absorb the sound around it. "He is Naruto." Tiamat's gaze flickered to Ophis, acknowledging her presence for the first time. Her eyes narrowed. "Ouroboros, what is your interest in this being?" Ophis turned her blank gaze back to Naruto. "He is interesting. He is finite, but he holds infinity. He is quiet. I like the quiet." Tiamat looked back at Naruto. The pieces clicking into place. The Ouroboros dragon, a being who cared for nothing but her quest for silence, was interested. This boy had casually deflected an attack that could have leveled the island. His power felt alien, ancient, and yet it contained a trace of her own. This was no simple mortal. She took a deep breath, reining in her remaining fury, her pride demanding she regain control of the situation. Naruto, she said, testing the name on her tongue. It felt small, human, a complete mismatch for the being standing before her. This is not over. I will have answers. I will discover the source of your power and its connection to mine. She did not threaten him again. It was a statement of intent. A promise. With a final, lingering glare that was a mixture of fury, humiliation, and a newfound grudging respect, Tiamat spread her great wings. With a powerful downbeat that sent another shockwave across the lagoon, she launched herself into the sky, disappearing back into the storm clouds she had created. The clouds then dissipated as quickly as they had formed, leaving the placid, gray sky as it had been before. The island was quiet once more. Only Naruto and Ophis remained on the dais. The ground was torn and scarred from Tiamat's arrival and her failed attack, a testament to the power that had been unleashed. Naruto looked at Ophis. You knew who she was. Ophis gave a slow, minute nod. Tiamat. She is loud. He felt a small, almost alien sensation in his chest. It was the faint stirring of amusement. He had faced down a god-tier dragon, and his most pressing concern was now a small, silent girl who seemed to have appointed herself his personal observer. His plan to study his power in solitude had failed spectacularly. Instead, he had sent a flare into the cosmic darkness. And the darkness had begun to look back. And it was far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Blood Mist and the Boiling Point. Naruto's return to Konoha was an event of silent, seismic significance. He did not report to the gate guards or announce his presence. He simply appeared in his apartment at dusk, walking through the wall as easily as a man stepping through a parted curtain. For the village's formidable surveillance network, it was as if he had materialized from thin air. Within 30 seconds, the chakra signature of the Anbu guard on the opposite rooftop flared with alarm. Within a minute, he could perceive the frantic, converging energies of a dozen shinobi moving towards his position. He was not alone. Ophis had followed him. She did not walk or fly. She simply existed in his proximity. A small, silent shadow in his periphery, a patch of reality that felt empty. To his 6 eyes, she was a constant, fascinating anomaly. To everyone else, she was nothing, a ghost that didn't even leave a ripple in the energy fields she passed through. Her presence was a new, undefined variable that he had yet to factor into his calculations of the world. He sat at his small table and waited. He had been gone for 53 hours. He had interacted with 2 beings who could shatter planets on a whim. He had peered into the chaotic heart of his own power. And now he was back in the cage, waiting for the zookeepers to arrive. The dissonance was profound. The door to his apartment didn't open, it was bypassed entirely as Hiruzen Sarutobi materialized in a swirl of leaves, his face a grim mask of relief and stern disapproval. He was flanked by 2 Anbu, their animal masks doing little to hide the tension in their chakra. The old Hokage's eyes, usually warm, were hard as he took in Naruto's calm demeanor. Then his gaze drifted past Naruto, to the space beside him, and a frown creased his wrinkled brow. You feel it too, Naruto stated. Not as a question. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed. There is a void. A distortion. What happened, Naruto? Where have you been? Investigating. Naruto replied simply. He offered no further details. He saw the flash of frustration in Hiruzen's aura, the desire to demand answers clashing with the newfound fear of the boy he could no longer comprehend. Your unauthorized departure caused a great deal of concern, the Hokage said, his tone the carefully measured one of a leader addressing a volatile asset. We believed you may have been abducted. No one in this village has the capacity to abduct me, Naruto said. It was a simple statement of fact, devoid of arrogance, which only made it more unnerving. Hiruzen sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of his office. He looked tired. The embers of his chakra were burning low. He had come here for a confrontation, but he knew it was pointless. Lecturing Naruto was like lecturing a tidal wave. Instead, he shifted tactics. He was here for another purpose. Perhaps not, Hiruzen conceded, pulling a scroll from his robes. But your power, your uniqueness, presents us with problems. And opportunities. I have a mission for you, Naruto. A mission of the highest importance, one that could alter the political landscape of the elemental nations. Naruto's gaze fell upon the scroll. He saw the high-grade chakra ink, the official seal of the Hokage. The faint traces of Danzo's energy signature clinging to the parchment. He knew its contents before it was ever unfurled. Kurigakure, he said. Hiruzen paused, his hand hesitating. How did you? The village hidden by the mist is embroiled in a brutal civil war, Naruto continued, his voice a flat monotone. The rule of the fourth Mizukage, Yagura, has become a bloody tyranny. A resistance movement, led by a Jonin named Meitarumi, is on the verge of being crushed. You wish to send me, under the guise of a diplomatic envoy, to mediate the conflict. In reality, it is a test. You wish to see how I handle a large-scale, politically sensitive conflict zone. Danzo wishes to see how I can be deployed as a strategic weapon. You are throwing me into a meat grinder to see what comes out the other side. Quote, the two Anbu stiffened, their hands moving towards their blades. Hiruzen raised a hand to stop them, his face a mixture of shock and weary resignation. The boy's perception was monstrous. The intricate political machinations, the layers of subterfuge, he saw through it all as if it were glass. And will you go? Hiruzen asked, his voice quiet. It is a complex problem. Naruto replied after a moment's thought. The variables are interesting. I accept. Hiruzen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The boy had agreed to a near-suicide mission with the same emotional investment one might have for a new puzzle. He handed over the scroll containing the official mission parameters, a pointless formality. You will lead a small team. I have assigned Hitaki Kakashi as your second in command. His experience will be invaluable. The Sharingan is a useful data-gathering tool, Naruto acknowledged. He is an acceptable choice. The Jew, RNEY to the land of water was a study in atmospheric decay. They left Konoha under a clear sky, a team of 4 Konoha shinobi and one invisible, silent passenger that only Naruto could perceive. Kakashi, his single eye sharp and observant, kept glancing around, his head tilted as if listening for a sound he could never quite hear. He could feel the wrongness that Ophis projected, a subtle friction against the natural world that set his teeth on edge. Something bothering you, Kakashi-senpai? One of the other Jonin asked. Just static in the air, Kakashi had replied, his gaze lingering for a moment on Naruto's impassive face. As they traveled eastward by boat, the world began to lose its color. The vibrant greens of the land of fire bled into a muted palette of grays and blues. The sky became a permanent, oppressive ceiling of thick, white fog. The air grew damp and cold, heavy with the smell of brine, rust, and something else, the faint, coppery scent of old blood. It clung to everything, a miasma of memory that the endless ocean wind could not wash away. Kurigakure was not a single island but an archipelago, its islands connected by rickety bridges and shrouded in a perpetual mist that served as its greatest defense. Their destination was not the main village, but a hidden cove on a remote island that served as a temporary headquarters for the rebellion. As their small boat navigated the treacherous, rock-studded channels, Naruto's 6 eyes pierced the fog with ease. He saw the rebel patrols hidden amongst the rocks, their chakra signatures flickering with anxiety and suspicion. He saw the traps laid beneath the water, crude but effective explosive seals and nets. He saw the fear that permeated the entire island like a disease. It was a gray, sickly aura that clung to the rebels. A stark contrast to the disciplined, cold blue of the Konoha shinobi. They were met at a hidden dock by a man with a scarred face and a weary but defiant look in his eyes. His name was Ao, and he was the rebellion's chief censor and strategist. His gaze was immediately suspicious, lingering on the Konoha headbands. Lord Hokage's envoys, Ao said, his tone laced with skepticism. You are brave, or foolish, to come here. This is not a place for diplomacy. We are here to offer aid, Kakashi replied, his voice a placid counterpoint to Ao's hostility. Aid, Ao scoffed. Konoha H. as stood by for years while Yagura butchered his own people and turned our home into a bloodbath. Why the sudden charity? Naruto stepped forward. Because the political calculus has shifted. Destab. I listed Kurigakure as a threat to the current balance of power. A victorious but weakened rebellion, indebted to Konoha, is a strategic asset. Your cynicism is justified, but your current situation is too desperate to afford it. Take us to your leader. Ao was taken aback, both by the blunt, cold honesty and the authority with which Naruto spoke. This was no mere genin. He looked at Kakashi, the famed copy ninja, who simply gave a one-eyed shrug as if to say, "You get used to it." Swallowing his retort, Ao grunted and led them through a network of winding, dripping tunnels into the heart of the rebel base. The headquarters was a large, natural cavern, expanded and reinforced with Earth-style jutsu. It was crowded, damp, and smelled of sweat, antiseptic, and fear. Shinobi of all ages, many of them wounded, hurried back and forth. Their faces etched with the strain of a long, losing war. They looked at the Konoha shinobi with a mixture of hope and deep-seated distrust. They were led to a smaller, drier cavern that served as a command center. A large map of the archipelago was spread across a stone table, littered with markers indicating troop movements and enemy positions. And standing before it, her back to them, was a tall woman with long, auburn hair styled in an intricate top knot. She turned as they entered. Her face was beautiful, with striking green eyes and a small mole under her right lip. But it was a beauty tempered by exhaustion and immense pressure. She carried herself with the grace of a noble and the weariness of a soldier who hadn't slept in a week. This was Maid Terumi, Kakashi of the Sharingan, she said, her voice a smooth, melodic alto that was at odds with their grim surroundings. It has been many years. I see Konoha has finally seen fit to grace us with its presence. There was a charming, almost playful lilt to her words, but Naruto's six eyes saw the cold, hard calculation behind them. Her aura was a complex swirl of fiery determination, deep-seated sorrow for her people, and a razor-sharp political mind. She was a leader, through and through. "Mei Dono," Kakashi said with a slight bow. "Allow me to introduce my team. And our leader for this mission, Uzumaki Naruto." Mei's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in surprise as she looked at Naruto. She had expected a seasoned Jonin commander, not a boy who looked barely old enough to be a Chunin. A child. Hiruzen sends a child to mediate a war. Her charming tone was gone, replaced by undisguised disappointment and anger. Is this some kind of insult? No, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tension. It is an investment. He walked to the table, his eyes scanning the map. But he wasn't looking at the ink and parchment. He was perceiving the energy of the entire archipelago, a real-time, three-dimensional map in his mind. "Your situation is worse than you are letting on," he stated, his finger tracing a line on the map that corresponded to a series of outer islands. "Your supply lines here are compromised. Yagura's forces aren't attacking you head-on, they are strangling you. They have laid siege to the farming communities on these islands. Within 3 days, your food supplies will be exhausted. Your forces are spread too thin, trying to defend too many points at once. You are projecting strength, but your chakra signature as a whole is flickering. You are losing." The entire room fell silent. Ao's jaw was slack with shock. Mei's green eyes, moments ago flashing with anger, were now wide with disbelief. Everything he had said was true. It was the rebellion's most closely guarded secret. A desperate situation known only to her inner circle. For this boy to have surmised it within minutes of his arrival was impossible. "Your sensory abilities are remarkable," Mei said, her voice now cautious. Analytical. She was reassessing him, her mind racing. "Who are you, really?" "I am the solution to your problem," Naruto replied, his gaze unwavering. "Your strategy is flawed. You are fighting a defensive war against an opponent with superior numbers and resources. You cannot win a war of attrition. You must shift the paradigm. A single, decisive strike again. Saint a high-value target is required to shatter Yagura's command structure and galvanize the populace to your side." "A high-value target," Ao interjected. "You mean the 7 ninja swordsmen? They are Yagura's loyal dogs. And they are monsters. We have lost hundreds of shinobi trying to engage even one of them. Their power is overestimated," Naruto countered calmly. "They rely on the reputation F their blades and the fear they inspire. Their teamwork is poor, predicated on individual arrogance. They are a scalpel, not an army. And a scalpel can be broken. May stared at him, a whirlwind of thoughts behind her eyes. This boy spoke with an impossible, unnerving confidence. He had dissected her entire war effort with the cold precision of a master surgeon. Was he a genius, a madman, or something else entirely? A flicker of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months, ignited within her. "What do you propose?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I propose a hunt," Naruto said. Suddenly, the cavern shook. A powerful explosion from the surface sent dust and pebbles raining down from the ceiling. A panicked shinobi burst into the command center, his face pale with terror. "It's an attack. The 7 swordsmen. All of them. They found us." The blood drained from Ao's face. May's expression hardened, her weariness replaced by the fierce look of a cornered lioness. "All hands to defensive positions. Now." Quote. As the rebels scrambled into action, May turned to Naruto, her eyes blazing. "It seems your hunt has come to us, boy. Let us see if your confidence is backed by skill." She raced from the room. And Naruto followed, Kakashi and the others close behind. As they emerged into the misty air of the cove, the scene was one of chaos. 7 figures stood on the ridge overlooking the rebel base, their silhouettes menacing against the gray sky. Even from a distance, Naruto could see their legendary blades. The massive, bandaged Samahata. The long, thin Nuibari. The blunt-bladed Kabutowari. The twin swords Kiba. The explosive Shibuki. And the cruel executioner's blade, Kubikiribocho, wielded by the infamous Zabuza Momochi. They weren't attacking en masse. They were enjoying themselves, picking off the scrambling rebels with sadistic pleasure. Kushimaru Kuriashi, wielder of Nuibari, laughed maniacally as he stitched shinobi together with his deadly wires. Jinpachi Munashi, user of Shibuki, cackled as each swing of his sword created a devastating explosion. Yoden. Yokai no Jutsu. Lava release. Melting apparition technique. May roared, spewing a glob of molten rock towards the swordsmen. They scattered, laughing. "Feisty, aren't they?" sneered a man with sharp, pointed teeth, Raiga Kurosuke, wielder of the Kiba blades. "Let's show them some real flash." He raised his twin swords. And lightning crackled between them. The battlefield was a maelstrom of conflicting energies. Naruto stood still for a moment, his 6 eyes absorbing it all. He saw intricate flow of chakra in May's lava and boil release jutsu. He saw the unique, almost sentient chakra of the legendary swords. Samahata writhed with a hungry, parasitic energy. Shibuki was saturated with explosive tags, a volatile, unstable system. Nuibari's wires were conduits for the user's chakra, designed for piercing and binding. He saw their weaknesses. He saw their attack patterns. He saw the arrogance that left them open. "Kakashi," Naruto said, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Zabuza is yours. You understand his technique better than anyone here. Keep him occupied." Kakashi's eye curved in a smile. With pleasure, he drew his kunai and vanished, reappearing in front of Zabuza in a clash of steel. "May Dono," Naruto continued, turning to the rebellion's leader. "Your area of effect jutsu are powerful, but they are draining your reserves. Focus on containment. Use your boil release to create a corrosive mist. Obscure their vision, limit their mobility. Force them to fight on your terms." May gave him a sharp, appraising look, then nodded. "Ow. Coordinate the defense. Create a perimeter." She began forming hand signs, a thick, acidic vapor pouring from her lips, adding to the natural fog and creating a dense, dangerous screen. With the 2 most powerful defenders occupied, Naruto turned his attention to the others. He began to move. His first target was Kushimaru, who was gleefully puppeteering several captured rebels with his wires, forcing them to attack their own comrades. Naruto appeared behind him like a ghost. Kushimaru, an elite shinobi, felt a flicker of displaced air and spun around, his cruel, stitched smile widening. A new toy. He lashed out with Nuibari, the deadly needle-like sword shooting forward at incredible speed, its wire unspooling behind it. The attack was designed to pierce multiple targets and then stitch them together. Naruto didn't dodge it, he simply raised his hand and caught the wire. Kushimaru laughed. "Fool, Now he stopped. He tried to retract the wire, but it wouldn't move. He tried to channel chakra through it to shock Naruto, but his chakra simply dissipated at the point of contact. Naruto's 6 eyes were analyzing the flow, and his own chakra was perfectly negating it. Your thread is thin, Naruto said. He flicked his wrist. An invisible, razor-sharp blade of wind chakra, perfectly calibrated, shot along the wire. It was too fast to see. Kushimaru's eyes widened as his own wire, his ultimate weapon, wrapped around him, pinning his arms to his sides. He had been bound by his own technique. Naruto then appeared before him and delivered a single, precise chop to the back of his neck. Kushimaru collapsed, unconscious. One down. The other swordsmen saw this, their amusement turning to rage. Insolent brat, roared Jinpachi, swinging his explosive sword, Shibuki. A scroll of explosive tags unrolled from the sword, detonating in a massive fireball that engulfed Naruto. Mei cried out in alarm. But as the smoke cleared, Naruto stood in the same spot, untouched. A thin, shimmering barrier of his infinity had surrounded him, halting the explosion centimeters from his body. Predictable, Naruto said. He vanished. He reappeared directly above Jinpachi, who was still off balance from his powerful swing. Naruto didn't attack the man. He attacked the sword. His foot came down in a precise axe kick, not with brute force, but with a perfectly focused pulse of chakra aimed at a specific stress point on the sword's scroll mechanism he had identified earlier. There was a sharp crack. The complex mechanism that fed the explosive tags into the blade shattered. Shibuki was now just a blunt, heavy club. Jinpachi stared at his now useless weapon in disbelief, and a powerful uppercut Naruto sent him flying into the rock wall, knocking him out cold. 2 down. The tide of the battle was turning. The rebel shinobi, who had been terrified and disorganized, were now galvanized by this impossible display. Their fear was replaced by a surge of fighting spirit. They began to push back, their attacks more coordinated, their morale soaring. Mei watched from the edge of her corrosive mist, her heart pounding. The boy moved with a grace and efficiency that was terrifying. He wasn't fighting like a shinobi. He was fighting like a force of nature, dismantling the legendary 7 sword. Smen as if they were misbehaving children. The fear she felt for her people was now mingled with a profound, breathtaking awe for him. The remaining swordsmen, realizing they were facing something beyond their comprehension, began to fall back, but one of them was put in a desperate position. Raiga Kurosuke, trapped by a pincer movement of rebel shinobi, saw Mei directing the flow of battle from a rocky outcrop. In a desperate gambit, he gathered all the lightning in his kiba blades and unleashed it in a massive, unavoidable blast directly at her. Mei's eyes widened. She was out of position, her chakra low from maintaining the mist. She couldn't dodge in time. This was it. And then, time seemed to break. Naruto, who had been on the far side of the battlefield, saw the attack. He saw Mei's impending death. He saw the desperation of the rebels who were about to lose their leader. A new emotion, one he hadn't fully processed before, surged through him, a cold, protective fury. He would not allow this asset, this competent leader who was fighting for her home, to be erased from the board. It was inefficient. The caged sun in his gut didn't just rattle its bars. It melted them. Annoying. The single thought echoed in his mind as a wave of incandescent golden energy erupted from him. It was not the full transformation, but a controlled, violent burst. His blue chakra aura was consumed and replaced by a roaring, golden flame. His blonde hair flashed a brighter shade, and his blue eyes, already divine, seemed to burn with the light of a newborn star. His speed, his power, his very presence, multiplied by an order of magnitude. He didn't run. He simply ceased to be where he was and appeared in front of Mei, his back to her. The massive lightning blast, enough to vaporize solid rock, slammed into his outstretched palm. It didn't explode. It was absorbed, consumed by the golden aura, feeding the very power it was meant to attack. Naruto closed his hand into a fist, crushing the last vestiges of the lightning jutsu. He turned his head slightly, his now blazing eyes locking onto Raiga Kurosuke across the battlefield. The swordsman froze, his arrogance and rage evaporating into pure, undiluted terror. He was looking at a god. "You are loud," Naruto said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that seemed to vibrate in the very air. He raised his other hand and pointed a single finger at the swordsman. A thin, compressed beam of golden ki shot forth. It was not a grand, explosive attack. It was a silent, precise needle of pure energy. It struck Raiga's Kiba blades. The legendary swords, said to be the sharpest ever forged, capable of channeling the heavens, fury, shattered into 1,000 pieces. The concussive force behind the beam struck Raiga in the chest, sending him cartwheeling through the air and slamming into the side of the mountain with enough force to create a crater. The battlefield fell utterly silent. Even the clash between Kakashi and Zabuza faltered. Everyone, rebel, swordsman, Konoha shinobi, stared at the boy bathed in golden fire, his power a palpable, suffocating pressure that dwarfed everything else. The remaining swordsmen, their will to fight completely broken, grabbed their fallen comrades and vanished into the mist, retreating in terror. The golden aura around Naruto subsided, receding back into his core. He took a single, deep breath, the control reasserting itself. He turned to face Mei. She was staring at him, her beautiful face pale, her green eyes wide with a complex cocktail of emotions: gratitude, terror, awe, and something else, something deeper and more personal. She had just been saved by a being of unimaginable power. She had seen the monster within him, and she had seen the control he wielded over it. He was not just a weapon. He was a man holding back an apocalypse with nothing but his own will. The hunt is over, she breathed, her voice shaky. For now, Naruto corrected. He looked out at the cheering, celebrating rebels. He had won them their greatest victory. He had saved their leader. He had become their symbol of hope. And from the shadows behind a rock, Ophis watched, her head tilted. Her monotone voice was a whisper on the wind, heard only by Naruto. He is bright. Mei took a step closer to Naruto, her professional mask gone, her gaze intensely personal. Konoha sent me a diplomat, she said, a small, shaky smile gracing her lips. But it seems they delivered a typhoon. She looked at him not as a boy, not as a weapon, but as an equal, a force of nature that had just permanently altered the course of her world. Let's talk about a real alliance, Naruto-kun. Not between our villages. Between you and me. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Echoes of Camelot, Vows of Steel. The victory in Kurigakure had consequences that rippled through the elemental nations. Naruto's name, once a whispered taboo in Konoha, became a subject of myth and fear across the continent. Reports, heavily redacted by Khan, Oha's intelligence division but still terrifying in their implications, spoke of a single shinobi dismantling a significant portion of the legendary Seven Swordsmen. Mei Terumi, now the uncontested leader of a reunified Kurigakure and soon to be the Godime Mizukage, had forged an ironclad, personal alliance with Konoha, an alliance built not on treaties, but on the foundation of the power she had witnessed. Naruto himself was now an entity unto himself. He was no longer just an asset or a Jinchuriki. He was a strategic deterrent, a living S-rank secret whose very existence altered global politics. He was granted a level of autonomy that was unprecedented, operating outside the standard chain of command. It was a cage gilded with freedom, a decision born equally of Hiruzen's trust and Danzo's fear. They could not control him, so they could only point him in a direction and hope for the best. Ophis remained his silent, spectral companion. Her presence was a quiet constant, a small patch of serene nothingness in a world of chaotic energy. The leadership of Konoha had learned to accept her existence as another inexplicable facet of the enigma that was Naruto Uzumaki. They couldn't perceive her, couldn't interact with her, and couldn't harm her. She was simply there. It was this new, strange status that led him to the land of waves. The report was anomalous, a footnote in the weak Lee intelligence summaries that would have been dismissed by anyone else. For 3 weeks, a strange, unnatural fog had descended upon the central region of the island nation. It did not dissipate with the wind, and those who entered it spoke of disorientation, of seeing things that weren't there, of the land itself feeling wrong. Shinobi patrols had vanished. It was a local curiosity, a C-rank investigation at best. But Naruto's 6 eyes, sweeping over the continent in a moment of idle observation, saw what the shinobi sensors could not. The fog was not water vapor. It was a wound in reality. It was a place where the fundamental laws of his world were being actively overridden by an intrusive, alien energy. It was not chakra. It was something else, something with a different texture, a different set of rules. It hummed with a frequency that was both arcane and structured. It was an interesting problem. He informed the Hokage he was investigating, a courtesy rather than a request for permission. Kakashi, by now unofficially assigned as the Naruto liaison, was tasked with accompanying him, a decision that made the silver-haired Jonin sigh with the resignation of a man perpetually assigned to chaperone a natural disaster. Their journey was quiet. As their boat approached the land of waves, the iconic, half-finished structure of the Great Naruto Bridge loomed through the mist. A monument to a past conflict that seemed almost quaint in comparison to the forces now at play. The fog was waiting for them. It was a tangible wall of white, swirling with an unnatural energy that made Kakashi's Sharingan ache. "I can't see through it," Kakashi noted, his single eye narrowed in concentration. "It's not a genjutsu. It's physical. It's messing with my perception of space." "It is not fog," Naruto clarified as he stepped off the boat onto the docks. Ophis drifted silently behind him. "It is a boundary layer. The world on the other side is operating on a different set of physical laws. The friction between the two is what you perceive as fog." Kakashi stared at him, his expression hidden by his mask. "Right. Friction between realities. Of course." He shook his head. "Lead the way, Naruto. This is well above my pay grade." Stepping into the fog was like plunging into cold water. The world shifted. The familiar sounds of the port town, the cry of gulls, the lapping of waves, vanished, replaced by an unnerving silence. The air grew cold and smelled of ozone, damp earth, and wet stone. And the landscape was a fever dream. The familiar wooden buildings and dirt paths of the land of waves were still there, but they were intertwined with something impossible. Great, crumbling walls of gray, moss-covered stone snaked through the town. A Japanese-style wooden bridge, slick with rain, arched over a canal, but it led to the shattered remains of a medieval stone bailey. A Shinto shrine's torii gate stood before a grove of trees, but within the grove, the ruins of a round stone tower. Something that belonged in a European fairy tale, reached for the perpetually gray sky. It was as if two different worlds had been smashed together, their pieces intermingling in a chaotic, surreal mosaic. "What is this place?" Kakashi breathed, his hand resting on the hilt of his tanto. "A localized reality override," Naruto explained, his six eyes taking in the impossible vista. He could see the energy that powered this illusion. It was not chakra, it was a finer, more volatile energy he mentally catalogued as mana. It flowed from a central point deeper within the anomaly, a powerful source that was actively imposing its structure onto the existing world. Someone is attempting to anchor a foreign reality here. They found villagers huddled in their homes, their auras flickering with terror. They spoke in hushed, frightened tones of shadowy beasts with glowing red eyes that stalked the unnatural twilight, and of a ghostly knight, a woman in silver armor, who fought the creatures with a sword of invisible wind. A king's duty. The thought surfaced in Naruto's mind, a foreign concept. This knight fought to protect these people, strangers in a strange land. It was an inefficient use of energy, yet undeniably noble. He followed the flow of mana, his perception leading them towards the epicenter of the anomaly. The hybrid landscape grew more intense. The familiar Japanese architecture almost completely supplanted by the gray, Gothic stonework of a forgotten age. As they entered what looked like the courtyard of a ruined castle, they found the aftermath of a battle. The corpses of several shadowy, wolf-like creatures were dissolving into black motes of mana. And in the center of the courtyard, standing over the last fading beast, was the knight. She was exactly as the villagers had described. Clad in beautifully crafted plate armor of gleaming silver and royal blue, she cut a figure of immense strength and dignity. Her face, framed by golden hair tied in a neat bun, was one of youthful beauty, but her emerald green eyes held the ancient authority and weary resolve of a monarch who had seen 1,000 battles. She held her hands before as if gripping the hilt of a longsword, but the blade itself was invisible, the air shimmering and distorting around it. She turned as they approached, her stance shifting instantly into one of combat readiness. Her senses, honed by countless life or death struggles and augmented by a skill he perceived as instinct, screamed that the quiet boy before her was a being of immense, terrifying power. She couldn't sense his energy in the way she understood it, but she felt his presence like a mountain suddenly appearing on the horizon. He had to be the magus responsible for this warped world. You, she called out. Her voice clear and strong, resonating with a kingly timbre. Are you the master of this domain? The one who has brought this suffering upon innocent people? Answer me, magus. Naruto regarded her coolly. He saw the intricate flow of mana through her body, a circuit far different from a shinobi's chakra network. He saw the divine construction of her armor, the conceptual weed. HT of kingship, that clung to her like a second skin. And he saw her weapon, a blade hidden by a complex magical enchantment, a powerful wind elemental compressed into a sheath of air. I am not, Naruto replied. I am here to solve this problem. Words are meaningless from a caster, the knight retorted, her grip tightening on her invisible sword. Your power feels vast and unnatural. If you are not the enemy, then stand aside and allow me to fulfill my duty. Before Naruto could respond, she charged. She moved with the explosive speed of a true warrior, her armor making no sound. The ground cracked beneath her feet as she closed the distance in an instant, her invisible blade swinging in a deadly arc aimed at his neck. It was an attack meant to end the fight before it began. Kakashi's Sharingan whirred, but he couldn't even fully track the movement. He shouted a warning, but it was too late. Naruto didn't move, he simply tilted his head. The invisible blade passed by, its edge so close the wind it generated stirred his blonde hair. The force of her swing carried the knight past him. She spun, reversing her grip for a powerful backhand slash, a blur of silver and blue. Naruto took a single, calm step backward, the blade cutting through the space where he had just been. Your instinct is impressive, Naruto commented, his voice as calm as ever. It allows you to perceive the optimal path to victory. However, it is a predictive model. My perception is absolute. I do not predict your moves, I observe them as they happen. The outcome is already determined. The knight, whom he now knew by the name resonating from her very soul, Artoria Pendragon, gritted her teeth. This being, it wasn't dodging. It was simply not where her attacks landed, moving with an impossible, minimalist efficiency. It was like trying to strike a ghost. She poured more mana into her body, her speed increasing, her armor glowing with a faint blue light. She unleashed a flurry of strikes, a whirlwind of invisible cuts from every conceivable angle. Her swordsmanship was flawless, a masterclass of power and precision honed over a lifetime of war. It was a storm of steel that would have overwhelmed any other opponent. Naruto stood in the eye of that storm. He didn't use his infinity. He didn't need to. His 6 eyes saw every single attack, every feint, every subtle shift of her wrist. He moved with a fluid, mesmerizing grace. His hands and feet deflecting, parrying, and redirecting. He used the flat of his hand to turn aside a deadly thrust. He used 2 fingers to catch the flat of her invisible blade, disrupting her momentum. He never attacked. He only defended, his every action a perfect, calculated response. He was deconstructing her entire fighting style, learning it, understanding it, and rendering it completely and utterly useless. Artoria leapt back, breathing heavily, her heart pounding with a mixture of frustration and awe. This was impossible. No one, not even the most skilled knights of her round table, could have weathered that assault without a scratch. Who are you? She demanded, her voice tight with disbelief. I am the one who is going to end this, Naruto said. As if on cue, the ground began to tremble. From the ruined stonework around the courtyard, shadowy forms began to rise. The wolf-like creatures from before, dozens of them, their bodies formed of solidified mana. Their red eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They were constructs, puppets of the true magus, sent to eliminate the intruders. Artoria instantly spun to face the new threat, her frustration with Naruto momentarily forgotten. Her duty as a protector taking precedence. Stand back, civilian, she ordered Kakashi. This is no place for the weak. The beasts charged. Artoria met them head-on. Her invisible sword a blur of motion. With each swing, a creature was bisected, dissolving into black particles. She was a whirlwind of righteous fury, a bulwark of silver and steel standing between the monsters and the people she had sworn to protect. Naruto watched her, his head tilted in thought. He saw the pure, unyielding conviction in her aura. He saw her deplete her own mana reserves to protect a man she didn't know. In a world that was not her own. Her idealism was inefficient, impractical, and yet, it had a certain, undeniable power. He turned to Kakashi. Analyze her fighting style. Find patterns. The constructs are mindless. There will be an exploitable rhythm to their assault. He then looked towards the largest, most intact ruin, a grotesque fusion of a Japanese pagoda and a Gothic spire. That is the source. I will deal with the Magus. You will support the knight. Without waiting for a reply, Naruto walked towards the horde of shadow beasts. They parted before him as if he were not there. Their simple programming unable to register him as a threat, their senses completely baffled by his lack of a conventional energy signature. He walked through the thick of the battle untouched and unheard. A ghost passing through a war. He reached the base of the tower and placed a hand on the cold, magically infused stone. With his 6 eyes, he saw the complex network of magical runes and circuits that gave the structure its form. It was a brilliant, intricate piece of magecraft. It was also deeply flawed. He found a weak point, a place where the foundational runes were improperly aligned. He channeled a tiny, precise amount of his own chakra into the spot. The energy acted like a virus, disrupting the delicate flow of mana. A section of the wall dissolved into static, leaving a perfect, man-sized opening. Naruto stepped through it. The inside of the tower was a single, vast chamber. Wires, glass tubes, and arcane machinery hummed and glowed, a bizarre fusion of science and sorcery. In the center, a man in dark robes stood before a swirling vortex of purple energy, his hands raised, chanting in a forgotten language. He was the rogue Magus. Ah, an intruder, the Magus said without turning, his voice dripping with arrogance. You were clever to have bypassed my outer defenses. But it matters not. The ritual is nearly complete. Soon, this pathetic little world will be completely overridden. And I will be the master of my own, perfect reality. A new age of gods, with me as its sole deity. Naruto looked at the swirling vortex. He saw the threads of reality being pulled and twisted. He saw the immense strain this was putting on the local space-time continuum. The Magus was not a god. He was a child playing with cosmic dynamite. Your ritual is inefficient, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the man's triumphant laughter. Your energy conversion rate is less than 40%. The foundational formula has 17 critical flaws. You are not creating a new world. You are creating a localized cancer that will consume itself and this entire island within the hour. The Magus spun around, his face a mask of rage. Insolent insect, you cannot comprehend my genius. I will unmake you. He thrust his hands forward, and a volley of shimmering, purple spears of energy shot towards Naruto. They were incredibly fast, incredibly powerful, and utterly useless. Naruto's infinity flared into existence, and the spears slowed to a crawl, stopping just short of his face. He examined them with detached curiosity. A basic mana-to-energy conversion. Crude, but effective against a conventional target, he murmured to himself. The Magus stared in horror, his ultimate attack rendered into a museum exhibit. How? What are you? Naruto didn't answer. He walked forward, stepping around the frozen energy spears. He walked towards the central ritual circle, the heart of the Magus' operation. The Magus, in a panic, erected a powerful barrier, a shimmering dome of magical energy. Naruto placed his hand on it, analyzed its structure, found the frequency at which the mana vibrated, and simply passed his hand through it as if it were water. He stood before the main console of the ritual. He could see the entire complex equation laid out before him. With a few precise touches, he began to edit it. He didn't use an opposing spell. He didn't use brute force. He simply corrected the Magus' math. He rerouted a power conduit here, severed a logical loop there, and altered the final command from override reality to execute safe shutdown. The grand, swirling vortex of purple energy flickered, wavered, and then collapsed in on itself with a soft whump. The humming machinery fell silent. The entire tower groaned, its structural integrate. Why failing as the mana that sustained it dissipated? Outside, the effect was immediate. The shadow beasts all shrieked and dissolved into nothingness. The unnatural fog began to recede, and patches of the normal blue sky could be seen for the first time in weeks. Artoria stood amidst the fading corpses of the beasts, leaning on her invisible sword, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had defeated them all. But the cost to her mana reserves had been great. She looked up at the tower as it began to crumble, a sense of dread filling her. Had the boy succeeded, or had he been caught in the tower's collapse? The Magus, his life's work undone in seconds, let out a scream of pure, impotent rage. He gathered the last of his power and summoned his final trump card, a grotesque, hulking golem of animated stone and twisted magic. His guardian. It rose from the floor, its eyes glowing with a baleful light, and charged towards Naruto. But at that moment, the roof of the tower exploded inwards. A brilliant, holy pillar of golden light lanced down from the heavens, striking the golem dead center. The creature didn't even have time to scream as it was utterly annihilated, vaporized by a power T. Hat was the conceptual opposite of its own dark nature. Artoria stood on the courtyard below, her sword finally revealed. Excalibur, the legendary sword of promised victory, shining like a miniature sun in her hands. Its divine light having pierced the tower's roof to smite her foe. She had sensed the final guardian through her instinct and had known, with absolute certainty, that this was the final enemy. As the light faded, the tower finished its collapse, crumbling into a pile of mundane stone and scrap. Naruto walked out of the dust cloud, completely unharmed. The anomaly was over. The real Arthurian landscape faded like a watercolor painting in the rain, leaving behind the familiar, humble reality of the land of waves. The air smelled of salt and fish again. The sky was blue. The problem was solved, but one piece of the puzzle remained. Artoria Pendragon stood on the ground that was now, once again, the great Naruto Bridge. The magical connection that had pulled her here was gone. The ritual was broken. She could no longer feel the pull of the throne of heroes. She was stranded, a king without a kingdom, a knight without a quest, a servant without a master. She sheathed Excalibur, the blade once again vanishing into a sheath of wind. She walked towards Naruto and Kakashi, her armor clinking softly. Her face was a mask of regal composure, but Naruto could see the storm of uncertainty in her aura. "You have my gratitude," she said, her voice formal, yet sincere. She looked directly at Naruto. "Your methods are unorthodox. But your intent was clear. You fought to protect these people. You have the heart of a true knight." "I am not a knight," Naruto said. "I am a shinobi." "Perhaps," Artoria conceded, a small, thoughtful smile touching her lips. "But I have known many kings who possessed far less nobility than you have shown today. You wield a power that could shatter the world, yet you use it with the precision of a surgeon and the restraint of a true leader. You carry a heavy burden." She looked out at the peaceful sea, her gaze distant. "My path back to my own time is gone. I am a stranger in this land." She turned back to him, her emerald eyes meeting his impossible blue ones. There was no fear in her gaze now, only a profound respect and a dawning curiosity. "Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, what does a king do when their kingdom has vanished?" It was a question not of strategy, but of philosophy. He had solved the physical problem of the anomaly, but now he was faced with a new one, a displaced monarch with an unshakable moral compass and power to rival a small army. He had come to the land of waves to investigate a fog and had left with a king. The variables of his life were becoming more complex, and more interesting, by the day. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. A cat in the night. A fox in the sun. A month passed in a state of surreal normalcy. The Land of Waves incident had concluded, but its primary consequence, Artoria Pendragon, remained. He had been quietly integrated into Konoha's ecosystem under Naruto's official supervision, a situation that was a constant source of bewilderment for the village leadership. She was a king without a throne, a living anachronism of chivalry and honor dropped into a world of espionage and morally gray pragmatism. She spent her days in rigorous training, her nights studying scrolls on this new world's history. Her regal composure a stark contrast to the shinobi culture around her. Her relationship with Naruto was one of deep, abiding respect between two fundamentally different leaders, a silent understanding that transcended their bizarre circumstances. Naruto's life had also settled into a new rhythm. He was a shadow that held the authority of a cage, his requests met with swift, unquestioning obedience. He spent his time not on D-rank missions, but in the village's deepest archives, his 6 eyes devouring ancient texts on fuinjutsu, chakra theory, and the history of the Uzumaki clan. He was piecing together the puzzle of his own origins, his quest for understanding having turned from the cosmic back to the personal. Ophis was a constant presence, a silent observer content to simply exist in the proximity of his unique energy, her stillness a strange comfort. The new disruption arrived not with a storm or a tear in reality, but with the quiet dignity of old tradition. A messenger, a woman with the subtle, graceful features of a fox and wearing the formal kimono of an imperial envoy, had requested an audience. She bore a single, elegant scroll of handmade paper, sealed with Wax bearing the crest of a 9-tailed kitsune. It was an invitation from Yusaka, the leader of the Kyoto Yukai faction. The purpose stated was a desire to discuss matters of shared heritage and mutual interest between the world's 2 known 9-tailed beings. Hiruzen, when consulted, had seen the monumental opportunity. The Yukai of Kyoto were an ancient, powerful, and staunchly neutral faction in the supernatural world. An alliance with them would be an unimaginable boon for Konoha. He had agreed instantly, granting Naruto full diplomatic authority. Naruto himself accepted for a different reason. The invitation mentioned access to their knowledge of senjutsu, the art of harnessing natural energy. It was a subject of profound interest to him, a potential key to further understanding and controlling the golden power within. He decided to bring Artoria. The official reason was that she was a formidable guard. The true reason was that he felt it was important for the stranded king to see more of the world she now inhabited. To understand that it was more than just shinobi villages and political maneuvering. She, in turn, accepted with solemn grace, curious to witness the court of a non-human monarch. Their journey was by train, a modern concession that Artoria found both fascinating and undignified. As the steel behemoth sped across the landscape, she watched the world blur past. A stoic statue of blue and silver amidst the chattering civilians. This land is a strange tapestry, she murmured, her gaze distant. A mixture of profound tradition and startling modernity. It is difficult to find its heart. Its heart is not in one place, Naruto replied, his eyes closed as he perceived the flow of energy across the country. It is a network, a system of conflicting and cooperating interests. A kingdom should have a singular heart. A capital. A king, she countered, her worldview absolute. A system is more resilient than a single point of failure, he stated simply, ending the philosophical debate. Kyoto was unlike any place Artoria had seen. It was a living, breathing city where the ancient and the modern coexisted in a delicate, beautiful dance. They disembarked at a bustling, futuristic station. All gleaming steel and glass, yet a short walk brought them to streets lined with traditional wooden machiya, their paper screens glowing softly in the afternoon light. The air itself felt different. In Konoha, the ambient energy was sharp, disciplined, tinged with the readiness of a military state. Here, the energy was deep, old, and overwhelmingly natural. It flowed through the city like a great, placid river, a palpable life force that seemed to emanate from the very earth. Their Yukai escort, the same fox-like woman who had delivered the invitation, led them away from the bustling tourist paths. She brought them before what looked like a simple, unadorned stone wall at the end of a quiet alley. She placed her hand upon it and whispered a word. The stone shimmered, and the wall dissolved like mist, revealing a path that had not been there a moment before. They had crossed the veil. The world on the other side was Kyoto, yet not. The light was softer, the colors more vibrant. The air was thick with the scent of cherry blossoms, incense, and the crisp, clean smell of pure natural energy. Tengu with feathered wings perched on rooftops, observing them with sharp, intelligent eyes. Kitsune in beautiful kimonos walked the streets, their multiple tails swaying with hypnotic grace. It was a world of living myth, hidden just beneath the surface of the mundane. Artoria's hand rested instinctively on the hilt of her invisible sword, her senses on high alert. This place was saturated with a power she recognized as fundamentally different from her own, yet just as potent. So this is the court of the Yukai, she whispered, her eyes wide with a warrior's appraisal. Their destination was the Fushimi Inari Shrine, a breathtaking complex of sands of vibrant red torii gates that snaked up a mountainside. Here, however, it was more than a place of worship, It was the seat of power, the central keep of the Yukai faction. As they ascended the stone steps, Yukai of all shapes and sizes bowed respectfully, their gazes a mixture of curiosity and reverence for their leader's guests. They were led into the main hall, a vast chamber of polis. Head dark wood and intricate painted screens depicting scenes from Yukai folklore. The room was filled with the Yukai elders, powerful Tengu generals, ancient Kitsune mystics, Tanuki elders with shrewd, intelligent eyes. Their combined energy was formidable, a heavy blanket of ancient power and authority. And on a raised dais at the far end of the hall, seated on a simple yet elegant throne, was their leader. Yusaka was captivating. She was a woman of breathtaking beauty and grace, with long, flowing blonde hair and gentle, intelligent golden eyes. She wore an immaculate white and red Miko Priestess outfit that did little to hide the regal power she commanded. 9 magnificent, golden fox tails, each one radiating an immense yet gentle aura of pure life force, fanned out behind her, swaying lazily in the air. She was the mirror of Kurama's power, but where he was a chaotic force of nature, she was a serene, nurturing sun. "Welcome, guests from Konoha." Yusaka's voice was warm and melodic. Yet it carried an undeniable weight of authority that filled the vast hall. "It is an honor to receive you. I am Yusaka." Artoria, a monarch in her own right, felt an immediate, instinctual respect. She gave a slight, formal bow of her head, a gesture of courtesy between sovereigns. Naruto simply looked at her, his 6 eyes taking in the entirety of her being. He saw her immense power, a vast ocean of senjutsu and yujutsu. Perfectly controlled, but he also saw the faint, golden threads of worry and responsibility that were woven into her life force, the heavy burden of being the sole protector of her people. She was not just a queen, she was a mother to her entire race. "She is strong, Kit," Kurama's voice rumbled in Naruto's mindscape. The great fox, usually a being of pure cynicism and rage, was observing the scene through Naruto's eyes with a rare, grudging respect. "Her power is calm, but as deep as the ocean. Do not mistake her gentleness for weakness." "I do not," Naruto replied mentally. "Her gentleness is her greatest strength. It is the foundation of her people's loyalty." He then bowed his head, a gesture of respect that surprised the Yukai elders. It was not the bow of a subordinate, but of an equal acknowledging another. "Yusaka Dono," Naruto said, his voice clear and respectful. "Thank you for your invitation. My partner and I are honored to be here." The use of the word, partner, to describe the entity within him sent a subtle ripple of shock through the assembled Yukai. They had expected a Jinchuriki, a jailer and his prisoner. This implied something else entirely. Yusaka's gentle smile widened slightly. "Your bond is unusual. We sensed the presence of another 9 tails, but the signature was not one of conflict. We wished to understand. Kurama is not my prisoner," Naruto stated simply. "He is a part of me. We coexist." HMPH. "Don't get sentimental on me now, brat," Kurama grumbled, but Naruto could feel a wave of pride emanating from the fox. The formal audience was a masterclass in diplomacy. Yusaka and her elders asked probing, clever questions, testing Naruto's intentions, his power, his character. Naruto, aided by Kurama's deep-sea knowledge of Yukai customs and his own unnerving perception, navigated the conversational minefield with flawless precision. He showed respect for their traditions without being subservient. He spoke of his own power with factual honesty, neither boasting nor showing false modesty. He treated them not as potential adversaries or tools, but as a sovereign nation with whom he was exploring a mutual understanding. He was, in a word, perfect. By the end of the audience, the initial suspicion of the Yukai elders had transformed into profound respect and deep curiosity. They had never encountered a human like him. Later that evening, they were given leave to explore the city. Yusaka had insisted they experience Kyoto's famous hospitality. Artoria, still processing the formal court of the Yukai, found herself walking beside Naruto through the lantern-lit streets of the Gion district. The area was alive with energy. Music drifted from hidden teahouses, the smells of grilling food filled the air, and the laughter of Yukai enjoying their night echoed through the narrow streets. "They possess a strange sort of honor," Artoria commented, her eyes taking in the sights. Their court was filled with ancient power and cunning, yet it was governed by a strict code of etiquette. They are not the monsters my world's legends speak of. Legends are merely data corrupted by time and fear, Naruto replied, his gaze sweeping the crowd. It was then that it happened. A figure, moving with a fluid, feline grace, stumbled out of a side alley and, accidentally, bumped into Naruto. Oh, my, I am so terribly sorry, Naya Tilda. The woman was stunning, in a wild, untamed way. She had long, lustrous black hair, golden cat-like eyes, and a figure that was both curvaceous and athletic. 2 black cat ears twitched atop her head, and 2 black cat tails swayed playfully behind her. She wore a revealing but stylish kimono that did little to conceal her assets, and she radiated an aura of playful, mischievous seduction. Artoria immediately stiffened, her hand moving to her invisible sword. Her instincts screamed, danger. This woman, despite her playful demeanor, felt like a predator. Ophis, from her usual position, tilted her head, her non-gaze fixing on the newcomer with a flicker of interest. Naruto, however, remained perfectly still. His 6 eyes saw everything. He saw the woman's immense power. A mastery of senjutsu that was different from Yusaka's, wilder, more primal. He saw the chaotic, untethered signature of a stray, a being with no master and no faction. He saw the SS class bounty on her head, a dark stain on her aura from the perspective of the underworld's factions. And he saw, beneath the layers of playful seduction and feigned clumsiness, a core of razor-sharp cunning and a desperate, primal need for survival. Kuroka, the most wanted nekosho in the world. You should be more careful, Naruto said, his voice even. This is a crowded street. Kuroka looked up at him, her golden eyes feigning a pout. You're not even going to help a poor girl up. How mean, Nya. She gracefully rose to her feet on her own, dusting off her kimono. You're new here. I can always spot the new faces. Here for some sightseeing. Quote, business, Naruto replied. Business, Kuroka purred, her eyes raking over him with appreciative appraisal. She could feel his power. It was immense, oceanic, and utterly alien. It was exactly what she was looking for. You must be very important. A handsome boy like you, with so much power, you must be very popular with the ladies. Her gaze flickered to the armored, blonde woman standing rigidly beside him. Though your taste in companions is a bit stiff. Artoria's emerald eyes flashed with indignation. You will show respect, woman. Your intentions are as plain as your vulgar attire. Kuroka just giggled, a sound like tinkling bells. Oh, the little knight has a temper. How cute. Don't worry, I don't bite, unless you want me to. She turned her full attention back to Naruto, her playful demeanor hardening ever so slightly. So, what business does a powerhouse like you have with the foxes? Don't tell me you're thinking of tying yourself down to their boring traditions. I am gathering information, Naruto stated. Information is my specialty, Kuroka said, leaning in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The foe, XES will only tell you the pretty stories. I can tell you the real ones. The secrets. All it will cost you is a little bit of your time, and maybe a little bit more. It was a blatant proposition, a test of his character. She expected him to be flustered, angry, or perhaps tempted. She did not expect his response. You are Kuroka, the nekosho fugitive, Naruto said, his voice flat. You are a master of senjutsu and yujutsu. You were wanted for the murder of your master and are designated an SS class stray devil. You are hiding in Kyoto under Yusaka's tacit protection because it is one of the few places the devil's influence is weak. Your goal is not seduction. Your primary motivation is the preservation of your species, which is endangered due to a genetic flaw. You seek a powerful mate to sire an equally powerful offspring. You approached me because you sensed my power and believe I am a suitable candidate. Your current line of questioning is an attempt to gauge my temperament and my affiliations. The silence that followed was absolute. Kuroka's playful smile froze on her face. Her pupils dilated, her cat ears flattened against her head. The flirtatious mask shattered, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock and a flicker of genuine fear. No one knew all of that. No one could have known all of that. He had just dissected her entire life, her deepest secrets and motivations, in a calm, analytical monologue. Artoria stared at Naruto, then at the stunned cat woman, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Kuroka took a shaky step back, her playful aura gone, replaced by the cautious, lethal tension of a cornered predator. How? She whispered, her voice losing its teasing lilt. I see things as they are, Naruto replied simply. I am not interested in your games, Kuroka. But I am not interested in your bounty, either. Your past is your own. Your motivations are your own. They are not my concern. That was the statement that truly broke her composure. In her life on the run, everyone had wanted something from her. To capture her, to kill her, to use her. No one, ever, had looked at the totality of who she was, fugitive, murderer, survivor, and simply dismissed it as irrelevant. This complete and utter lack of judgment was more disarming than any threat or seduction. She stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing. Then, a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. This one holding none of the earlier artifice. It was a smile of pure, dangerous intrigue. Well now, she purred, her confidence returning, but this time on a different foundation. This changes things. You are far more interesting than I thought, Naruto-kun. Far more. With a final, lingering look and a flick of her twin tails, she melted back into the shadows of the alley, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. The next day, Naruto was granted a private audience with Yusaka. This time, they met in a serene garden behind the main shrine. Yusaka's young daughter, a small, adorable kitsune named Kuno, was present, hiding shyly behind her mother's robes, peering at Naruto with curious eyes. Kuno has been very eager to meet the human who carries a nine tails within him, Yusaka said. Her smile warm and maternal. Naruto knelt down to Kuno's level. Hello, Kuno-hime. He reached out and with a flicker of chakra, created a small, shimmering, golden fox made of pure energy that danced in his palm. Kuno gasped with delight, her shyness forgotten as she reached out to touch the beautiful construct. Yusaka watched the interaction, her expression soft. You have a gentle soul, Naruto Dono, despite the immense power you wield. It is a rare combination. Her tone grew more serious. I have invited you here for more than just curiosity. The world is growing more unstable. The tentative peace between the three factions is fragile. As leader of the Yokai, my primary duty is to ensure the safety and prosperity of my people. Your existence, as a free agent of immense and unique power, is a new element on the grand board. A wild card, as they say. She looked him in the eye, her gaze direct and honest. I would like to propose an alliance. No, a formal treaty between Konoha and Kyoto, but a personal bond of friendship and mutual support between us. Between the leaders of the Yokai and the master of the maelstrom. We will grant you access to our deepest libraries. Our knowledge of senjutsu passed down for generations. In return, we ask only for your friendship. And that, should the day come when Kyoto faces a threat it cannot handle alone, we may call upon you as an ally. It was an offer of immense trust and value. She was not asking him to be her weapon, but her friend. A shield to be called upon only in the direst need. It was a partnership based on mutual respect. He looked at the powerful, graceful queen of the Yokai, at her hopeful, trusting daughter, and at the peaceful realm she had built. It was something worth protecting. I accept, Naruto said. A brilliant smile lit up Yusaka's face, a radiance that seemed to make the entire garden brighter. A bond had been forged, one that would have far-reaching consequences. As he left the garden, he could feel the faint, curious signature of Kuroka watching him from a distant rooftop. He now had the friendship of the Yokai Queen and the intense, dangerous interest of her most notorious fugitive. His web of connections was growing, each thread a different color, a different texture, a different world. And he stood at the center of it all, a calm, quiet enigma, observing the beautiful, chaotic pattern he was creating. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Dragon's Gambit. In the month following the diplomatic mission to Kyoto, a new equilibrium was established. Naruto spent his days in a specially sealed training ground on the outskirts of Konoha, a space granted to him for his personal use. Before him, laid open on stone pedestals, were the ancient scrolls gifted by Yusaka. They were masterpieces of calligraphy and theory, detailing the intricate art of senjutsu, the philosophy of becoming one with the natural world to harness its power. His 6 eyes did not just read the words. They consumed the intent behind them, perceiving the flow of natural energy the ancient masters had described, translating abstract concepts into tangible, observable data. He learned not by rote memorization, but by direct, flawless comprehension. Kurama, from his mindscape, acted as a cantankerous but knowledgeable guide, offering insights and corrections based on his own mill. Enya of experience is a being of pure natural energy. Artoria was often nearby, her own training a whirlwind of disciplined motion. She would practice her forms, her invisible blade cutting through the air with a sound like tearing silk. There was a quiet respect between them. She saw his studious dedication and felt the immense, controlled power he wielded. He observed her unwavering discipline, and saw the soul of a king who refused to bend. Ophis, as always, was a silent presence, often perched in a nearby tree, her inscrutable gaze fixed on Naruto, a creature of infinity fascinated by the finite being who dared to contain it. This fragile peace was not destined to last. It shattered on a bright, clear afternoon. The sky above Konoha was ripped open. Not literally, but the effect was much the same. A pressure wave, thick with draconic majesty and incandescent rage, slammed down upon the village, causing windows to rattle and the leaves on the trees to tremble. A vast shadow fell over the training ground, and with a ground-shaking impact that cracked the earth, she arrived. Tiamat. She stood 20 meters tall in her humanoid dragonic form, her aquamarine hair flowing like a waterfall. Her golden eyes burning with impatience. Her blue-scaled armor seemed to drink in the sunlight, and her great wings were folded behind her, radiating a tension that promised violence. She had not attacked, but her very presence had put the entire village on its highest alert. Alarms blared across Konoha, and within seconds, Naruto could perceive dozens of Anbu converging on the perimeter. Air chakra signatures alight with panic. Uzumaki Naruto. Tiamat's voice boomed, not with the volume of a shout, but with the innate, commanding resonance of a dragon king. I require your presence. Now. Artoria immediately moved to stand beside Naruto, her hand gripping the hilt of Excalibur. She felt the newcomer's immense power, a chaotic storm that dwarfed her own. A dragon, she breathed, her expression grim. Naruto. Is this an enemy? She is an acquaintance, Naruto corrected calmly, his gaze fixed on the proud Dragon King. With a problem she is too proud to admit she cannot solve alone. He raised a hand, signaling the approaching Anbu to stand down with a simple, universally understood gesture. He walked forward, stopping a respectful distance from the impatient dragon. Tiamat, your arrival is conspicuous. You could have sent a message. Messages are for lesser beings. Tiamat scoffed, crossing her powerful arms. The gesture was one of supreme arrogance, but Naruto's six eyes saw the subtle flicker of desperation in her aura, the fine tremor of anxiety in her energy field. She was a being of immense pride, and coming here was costing her dearly. I have tracked you, I have observed, I have deliberated, and I have reached a conclusion. Which is? Naruto asked, his patience infinite. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, the words catching in her throat. Quote, the wards, on the domain of the one who wronged me, they are keyed to repel any being of pure draconic lineage. I cannot pass them. Her jaw tightened. But your energy signature, it is a disgusting, chaotic amalgam of mortal vitality, natural essence, and some other, savage power. It is not purely draconic. It is an impurity that I have theorized may be capable of passing through the wards. She finally met his eyes. Her golden gaze fierce. I require you to act as my key. You will accompany me to the lair of the traitor Bahamut, you will bypass his defenses, and you will aid me in retrieving what is rightfully mine. This is the only reason I have deigned to speak to you again. She didn't ask for his help. She demanded his compliance. It was the only way her pride would allow her to frame the request. Artoria bristled at the dragon's tone. You dare make demands of him? After arriving in his home like a conquering warlord, Naruto simply looked at Tiamat, his perception cutting through her prideful facade to the truth of her quest. He saw the centuries of bitterness, the sting of betrayal, the deep wound to her very soul that the theft had caused. This wasn't about a treasure. It was about reclaiming her honor. I will help you, Naruto said. Tiamat was momentarily taken aback by his immediate, uncomplicated acceptance. She had been prepared for negotiation, for demands, for a battle of wills. His simple agreement left her off balance. Good, she grunted, recovering her composure. Then we leave at once. The domain is located within the underworld. A mortal like you cannot. That will not be a problem. The voice was a whisper, a void that seemed to suck the sound from the air around it. Ophis had drifted from her perch in the tree and now floated between Naruto and Tiamat. The Dragon King's eyes widened in genuine shock, her arrogance momentarily forgotten. The Ouroboros dragon, Tiamat breathed, a hint of awe in her voice. The silent, gothic girl from the shrine was one of the two most powerful beings in existence. And she was here, acting as Naruto's assistant. The boy's mysteries deepened. Ophis raised a small, pale hand. The space before her tore open, not with a violent rip, but with a silent, clean incision. A shimmering, oval portal of pure darkness appeared, swirling with the promise of a different reality. It hummed with a low, bass note that vibrated in one's very bones. A shortcut, Ophis stated simply. Tiamat stared at the portal, then back at Naruto, then at the silent dragon god floating beside him. For the first time, a sliver of doubt entered her mind. She had come here believing she was using a strange but useful mortal boy. She was beginning to suspect she was a minor character in a story far grander and more complex than she could possibly imagine. Artoria, remain here, Naruto instructed. This is a personal matter. The knight nodded, her expression grim. Be careful, Naruto. A dragon's gambit is often treacherous. He gave her a slight nod of acknowledgement and then stepped towards the portal. After you, Tiamat. With a final, haughty sniff, Tiamat turned and strode through the portal. Naruto followed, and the gateway to the underworld sealed behind them, leaving the Konoha training ground in a state of stunned silence. The world on the other side was a furnace. They stood on a precipice of black, obsidian-like rock, overlooking a cavern so vast it seemed to have its own horizon. The sky above was not a sky, but a ceiling of solid rock, lit by the angry, red-orange glow of 1,000 rivers of lava that flowed in great, fiery arteries across the cavern floor. The air was thick with the smell of brimstone and ozone, and the heat was a physical blow, an oppressive, suffocating blanket. This was the underworld, and in the center of the vast cavern, crumbling into ruin, was a city built on a scale meant for giants, the lost domain of a dragon god. The lair of Bahamut Prime, Tiamat growled, her voice filled with ancient venom. The dragon god of order and law, a title he spat upon when he betrayed me for power. Her aura flared, a tempest of furious blue energy. The artifact is in the central keep, but the entire city is protected by his master ward. It will sense my draconic nature and incinerate me if I attempt to cross. She pointed a clawed finger at a shimmering, almost invisible barrier that separated their precipice from the city proper. Show me if you're disgusting. Mixed blood is as useful as I hope. Naruto walked to the edge. The six eyes saw the ward not as a wall, but as a complex, multi-layered equation of draconic magic. It was designed to analyze the fundamental nature of any being that touched it and, if the signature was purely of dragon kind, to unleash an overwhelming countermeasure. It was a perfect defense against his own kind. But Naruto was not purely of any kind. He reached out and placed his hand on the shimmering barrier. He felt a powerful, analytical energy wash over him. Scanning him, he did not resist. He allowed it to see the components of his being. The deep, oceanic well of his Uzumaki chakra, the vibrant, life-affirming essence of the senjutsu he had begun to master, the raw, chaotic, alien key of his Saiyan heritage. The ward's ancient logic struggled to classify him. He was not a dragon. He was not a devil, nor an angel, nor a human. He was an anomaly, a living paradox that did not fit any of its pre-programmed definitions. After a moment of humming indecision, the ward flickered and allowed his hand to pass through. Tiamat stared, her jaw slightly agape. It worked. The relief in her voice was quickly masked by her pride. HMPH. Your impurity has its uses, it seems. Let us proceed. She walked through the now neutralized section of the ward. And Naruto followed. The moment they were both inside, the city itself seemed to wake up. Ancient runes on the crumbling black stone buildings began to glow with a menacing light. The air grew heavy with magical pressure. This was hostile territory. Their first major obstacle was a vast, circular chamber with no visible exit. The floor was a mosaic of complex, interlocking tiles. A pressure plate puzzle, Tiamat sneered. Child's play. She took a confident step onto a tile, and a bolt of powerful lightning shot from the ceiling, striking the spot where she had been a moment before. She leapt back, her eyes wide. It seems your playmate is more clever than you recall, Naruto observed calmly. His 6 eyes saw the truth of the room. It wasn't a pressure plate puzzle. It was a temporal one. Each tile was linked to a different microsecond in a repeating temporal loop. To cross, one had to step on the tiles in the exact sequence that matched the flow of time in the room. A pattern that shifted every few seconds. To an ordinary being, it was an impossible, random death trap. This requires precision, not power, Naruto said. Follow my exact footsteps. Do not deviate. Do not hesitate. Match my pace perfectly. Tiamat looked ready to argue, her pride stinging at being told what to do. But she had seen the power of the trap. She swallowed her retort and gave a curt, reluctant nod. Naruto began to move. He walked across the vast floor in a strange, meandering path that seemed to have no logic to it. He would step forward, then sideways, then pause for a precise 1.7 seconds. Then take 2 quick steps back before moving forward again. It was a complex, intricate dance with time itself. Tiamat, forcing herself to trust him, followed his every move. Her draconic grace allowing her to mirror him perfectly. They reached the far side of the room just as a door materialized from the solid wall. How did you know the path? She demanded, a hint of genuine curiosity in her voice. I wasn't following a path, Naruto replied. I was reading the music sheet. They continued deeper, encountering a series of ever more complex traps. A corridor filled with illusions that targeted a being's greatest regrets, which Naruto's perception saw through as simple light and sound manipulation, but which caused Tiamat to flinch, seeing visions of her past betrayal. A great chasm that could only be crossed by manipulating magical platforms with a combination of their different energy types, forcing them into a state of grudging but effective cooperation. With each obstacle they overcame, a subtle shift occurred in their dynamic. Tiamat's arrogance began to erode, replaced by a wary respect. She was a being of immense, world-breaking power, but that power was useless against these intricate, conceptual traps. Naruto's calm, analytical mind and his impossible perception were their only keys to survival. She found herself relying on him, trusting his judgment. A feeling she had not allowed herself to have for millennia. Their path was eventually blocked by the lair's first active guardians. In a vast, pillared hall, 2 massive golems of obsidian and molten lava rose from the ground, their forms radiating intense heat. Finally, Tiamat roared, a savage grin on her face. Something I can break. She charged, her fists wreathed in the blue energy of chaos karma, and slammed into one of the golems. The impact was titanic, shattering the creature's obsidian shell. But the molten lava beneath simply reformed, the golem repairing itself in seconds. They are powered by the lava flows beneath the floor, Naruto called out, his 6 eyes having already analyzed their entire structure and power source. Attacking their bodies is pointless. We must sever their connection to the source. He pointed to 2 large, glowing runes on opposite sides of the hall. Those are the conduits. I will take the one on the left. You take the right. We must strike them simultaneously. Tiamat, without hesitation this time, followed his command. They moved in perfect sync. As the golems lumbered towards them, Tiamat unleashed a powerful breath attack to keep them occupied, while Naruto used his speed to reach the far rune. Now, he yelled. He plunged his hand into the rune, his chakra disrupting the magical formula. At the same instant, Tiamat smashed her fist into the other rune, her draconic power shattering it completely. Their connection to their power source severed, the 2 great golems crumbled into inert piles of black rock and cooling lava. They stood in the silent hall, breathing slightly heavily. Tiamat looked at Naruto, a new light in her eyes. Your strategic mind is adequate. Coming from her, it was the highest of compliments. They finally reached the heart of the lair, a massive, cathedral-like vault. The air here was cold, a stark contrast to the rest of the domain. In the center of the vault, on a great obsidian pedestal, rested a pulsating, dark blue gemstone the size of a human heart. It glowed with a malevolent light, and Naruto could feel the immense, familiar power within it. The chaos karma, my essence, Tiamat whispered. Her voice filled with a longing so deep it was painful. But it was not unguarded. As they approached, the floor began to tremble. From a pool of shimmering, black liquid at the base of the pedestal, a creature began to rise. It was a hydra, a monstrous beast with a scaled, serpentine body and 9 long necks, each one ending in a vicious, fanged head. It was a being of pure, corrupted magic, Bahamut's final. Spiteful guardian. The hydra let out a 9-voiced roar that shook the vault to its foundations. This abomination is the final test, Tiamat growled, her battle spirit ignited. I will tear it apart. She charged, unleashing a torrent of chaotic energy that blew one of the hydra's heads to pieces. But before she could celebrate, the stump of the neck bubbled and fizzed, and 2 new heads grew in its place. The beast now had 10 heads. It regenerates, Naruto stated, his 6 eyes analyzing the process. And it grows stronger with each regeneration. A simple war of attrition is a losing battle. He saw the mechanism. A core in the main body was fueling the regeneration. But to get to the core, they needed to get past the heads. There is a brief window, a half-second after a head is destroyed. Before the regeneration command is executed. If the wound can be cauterized within that window, it cannot regrow. Tiamat looked at him. You are saying, you are the sword, I am the scalpel, Naruto finished. Destroy a head, I will handle the rest. A fierce, savage grin spread across Tiamat's face. It was a plan that appealed to her nature. Then let the symphony of destruction begin. What followed was a deadly, intricate dance. Tiamat became a whirlwind of destructive fury, her breath attacks and powerful physical blows obliterating one hydra head after another. And in the half-second window after each successful strike, Naruto would move. He appeared as a blur of motion, his hand wreathed in a precise, intensely hot flame of pure chakra, and seared the stump. The heat so intense it sealed the wound on a magical level. One by one, the heads were destroyed and their regeneration nullified. The hydra, shrieking in fury, focused all its remaining power into a final, desperate attack. The remaining heads opened their maws and unleashed a combined torrent of corrosive, dark energy. Tiamat, overextended from her last attack, was caught in the blast's path. She threw up a barrier. But the dark energy began to eat through it. It was then that a section of the ceiling, weakened by the battle, came crashing down. A massive pillar of stone slammed into Tiamat, pinning her leg to the ground and shattering her barrier. She was trapped, vulnerable. For the first time in millennia, Tiamat felt a spike of genuine fear. The hydra's attack surged towards her. But Naruto was there. He appeared in front of her, his back to the blast, his arms spread wide. This ends now, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. The golden energy, the chaotic power of the Saiyan, erupted from him. A controlled but overwhelming torrent of power. It formed a massive, roaring aura that met the hydra's dark energy head-on, consuming it, overpowering it, and turning it to nothing. He didn't stop there. With Tiamat still pinned, he took a step forward, the golden aura flaring. You injured my ally, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. That was a tactical error. He fired a single, compressed beam of golden ki from his fingertip. It struck the hydra's central body. The beast was vaporized, not defeated, not destroyed. Simply erased from existence. The vault fell silent. The golden aura receded. Naruto turned and walked to the trapped Dragon King. He placed his hands on the massive pillar that pinned her and, with a surge of raw strength, lifted it and tossed it aside as if it were a pebble. He offered her a hand. Tiamat stared at it for a long moment, then at his calm face. She ignored the hand and, with a grimace of pain, pushed herself up, her leg clearly injured. You saved me, she said, her voice soft, stripped of all its earlier pride. Why? The mission was to retrieve the artifact. My safety was irrelevant. Naruto looked at her, then at the pulsating gem on the pedestal. The mission was to help you, he said simply. The artifact was the objective. You were the mission. The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. Betrayed by the one she had trusted most. She had wrapped herself in pride and arrogance for thousands of years, believing trust to be a fool's game. This boy, this enigma she had intended to use as a key, had just risked himself for her. Had prioritized her over the objective, had defined her as the sole purpose of their perilous quest. Her formidable walls, built over eons of bitterness and solitude, crumbled into dust. She limped towards the pedestal, her tough facade broken, revealing the vulnerable, wounded being beneath. She reached out and placed her hand on the dark blue gem. A wave of immense power flowed from it, into her. A river returning to its source. Her aura surged, her power returning to its full, majestic glory. Her wounds, including her injured leg, healed in a flash of blue light. She was whole again. She turned to face him, her golden eyes no longer burning with rage or pride, but shining with a new, softer light. They were filled with a profound, raw emotion he had not seen in her before. Gratitude, humility, and something more, something that felt like a new beginning. Naruto, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Unveiling of the Saiyan. The 2 weeks following the excursion to the underworld were a period of profound and unsettling change. Tiamat, the proud Dragon King, had taken up residence in Konoha. She did not ask for permission. She simply materialized one day in the same training ground Naruto used, her presence a silent declaration of intent. Her arrogance, once a roaring bonfire, had been banked into the cold, sharp embers of a newfound purpose. She no longer spoke to Naruto with derision, but with a brusque, challenging respect. Their interactions became a daily ritual, grueling, high-intensity sparring sessions that leveled entire sections of the sealed training ground and forced the Hokage to triple the Fuinjutsu barriers. She became his teacher in the art of raw, untamed power. Your control is a cage, little maelstrom. She would roar, her breath attacks forcing him to maintain his infinity for punishingly long stretches. You must learn to ride the storm, not just contain it. Let it rage, let it break. Artoria observed these sessions with a mixture of awe and tactical disapproval. She saw the logic in Tiamat's brutal methodology but feared the consequences of unleashing such a catastrophic power. Her own sparring with Naruto was a stark contrast, a silent, lightning-fast dance of precision and prediction, a duel of two different philosophies of combat. Mei Terumi was also in Konoha, the guest of honor at a diplomatic summit solidifying the new era of cooperation between the leaf and the mist. Her presence added another layer of complexity. She watched Naruto's training with the shrewd eyes of a cage, seeing not just a boy, but a strategic deterrent whose power could guarantee her village's security for a century. Her interactions with him were warm, politically savvy, and underscored by the memory of the golden-haired god who had saved her life. The four of them, a quiet god in the making, a humble dragon king, a displaced night king, and a cunning Mizukage, form a bizarre and unprecedented constellation of power within the village. Ophis, a silent satellite, observed them all. The balance was strange, tense, but stable. Then the sky fell. It happened without warning. On a clear, peaceful afternoon, as the village hummed with civilian life, the attack came. It was not a frontal assault on the main gates. It was a coordinated, multi-pronged strike from within and without. A vast, complex transportation jutsu, fueled by the sacrifices of hundreds of Orochimaru's cursed seal subjects, activated simultaneously at 24 points across the village. The air tore open, and from these bleeding wounds in reality, an army poured forth. Shinobi from Otogakur, their faces twisted with fanatical devotion, flooded the streets alongside grotesque summons, giant snakes, monstrous spiders, and creatures that defied classification. But they were not alone. With them came beings of a different ilk. Devils, low-class and mid-class devils from minor houses, ire bat-like wings and demonic energy, a shocking, terrifying sight for the Konoha shinobi. They had been swayed by promises of a new territory, a world ripe for the taking, free from the stringent laws of their own realm. Simultaneously, the great barrier around Konoha flickered and died. Orochimaru himself, accompanied by the resurrected first and second Hokage, their souls bound in blasphemous Tensai bodies, appeared on the Hokage monument, their presence a wave of suffocating power and despair that washed over the village. Konoha, Orochimaru's voice, amplified by jutsu, hissed across the village like a serpent's threat. Your time is at an end. But do not despair. You will be the foundation upon which a new, glorious age is built. And you, Naruto-kun, I have come for you. You will be my new vessel, the perfect container for my immortality. Chaos erupted. It was a symphony of screams, explosions, and the clash of steel. The Konoha shinobi, though caught by surprise, responded with discipline, engaging the invaders in desperate, bloody skirmishes across the village. But they were outnumbered, outmatched by the sheer variety of threats. Their jutsu, designed to fight other shinobi, were unprepared for the strange magic and unnatural resilience of the devils. In the training ground, the 4 occupants felt the village shudder. Naruto's head snapped up, his 6 eyes seeing it all in an instant. He saw the multiple breaches, the composition of the invading army, the desecrated forms of the past Hokage, and Orochimaru's venomous, possessive gaze fixed on him. So, the snake has finally left its hole. Tiamat growled, a predatory fire igniting in her golden eyes. This is a declaration of war, Artoria stated, her face grim, her hand already gripping Excalibur's hilt. They are targeting civilians. This cannot be allowed. Mei's expression hardened into the mask of a cage at war. She bit her thumb, weaving a series of hand signs. My Kiri guard will answer my summons. We will not stand idle while our allies bleed. Naruto said nothing. A cold, terrifying calm settled over him. He was the target. This entire invasion, this slaughter, was for him. He felt the threads of responsibility, woven from his connections to these people, to this village, tighten around him. Ophis, he said, turning to the silent girl. Protect the evacuation shelters. Let no one pass. Ophis gave a slow nod. Her expression unchanging, and simply vanished, her form dissolving into nothingness. Tiamat, Naruto continued. The giant summons are yours. Keep them away from the village center. Cause as much destruction to the enemy as possible. A savage grin split Tiamat's face. With pleasure, she spread her great wings, and with a downbeat that flattened the trees for 50 meters, she launched herself into the sky. A blue comet of draconic fury streaking towards the largest of the rampaging snakes. Artoria, Mei, with me, Naruto commanded. We cut off the head of the serpent. The 3 of them blurred into motion, moving through the chaotic streets of Konoha like ghosts. Artoria was a beacon of silver and blue, her invisible sword a whirlwind of righteous fury that ooped down devils and Odo shinobi with equal, devastating efficiency. She moved to shield civilians, to intercept attacks aimed at wounded shinobi, her every action a testament to her chivalric code. Mei was a force of nature. Her lava and boil release techniques melting enemy formations and creating zones of impassable, corrosive mist, her Kiri guard appearing at her side to form a disciplined, deadly fighting force. But the enemy was endless. For every one they cut down, 3 more seemed to take its place. Naruto fought with a cold, terrifying precision. He didn't use grand jutsu. He moved through the battlefield like a surgeon, his 6 eyes identifying the critical threats, the enemy commanders, the linchpins of their formations. A single, precise strike to a devil's magical circle, AFLI. CK of his wrist that sent a Senbon to sever a puppeteer's chakra threads, a perfectly timed disruption of a jutsu's hand signs. He neutralized dozens of high-level threats with minimal effort, his calm demeanor an island of deadly stillness in a sea of chaos. They fought their way towards the Hokage monument, where the true threat resided. They found Hiruzen Sarutobi, his old body clad in battle armor, locked in a desperate struggle against his reanimated predecessors, the first and second Hokage. The old man was powerful, a god of shinobi in his own right, but he was fighting ghosts, his own teachers. And the emotional toll was as devastating as the physical one. Go, Naruto, Hiruzen roared, parrying a powerful water dragon from the Nadaime. Stop Orochimaru. Orochimaru watched from atop the monument, his serpentine eyes gleaming with amusement and desire. Come, Naruto-kun, come and show me the power that has a dragon king acting as your attack dog. The battle that followed was legendary. Naruto, Artoria, and Mei engaged the 2 reanimated Hokage. It was a battle of gods. Hashirama's wood-style jutsu, capable of creating entire forests in an instant, clashed with Mei's lava, which burned it to ash. Tobirama's unparalleled speed and water-style mastery were met by Artoria's instinct and the divine blade of Excalibur. Naruto acted as the fulcrum, his 6 eyes perceiving every weakness, calling out commands. His own attacks perfectly timed to disrupt their tandem assaults. But they were fighting immortals. Every injury they inflicted regenerated in moments. The battle was a stalemate. A war of attrition they could not win. And all around them, the village was burning. Naruto could see it all. He saw Kakashi, bloody and battered, fighting a losing battle against a cadre of high-ranking devils. He saw Guy and his team overwhelmed by sheer numbers. He saw the hospital, its defenses on the verge of collapsing. He saw Mei's Kiri guard being whittled down, her own chakra. A reserves running dangerously low as she unleashed torrent after torrent of lava to protect her people and his. He saw Artoria, a shining bastion of hope, take a devastating blow from Hashirama's Wu-D golem that was meant for a group of young genin. He saw her armor crack, saw the blood spill from her lips as she was thrown back, her body slamming into a stone wall. She pushed herself up, her will unbreakable. But her light was dimming. And that's when he felt it. The cold, reptilian touch of Orochimaru's killing intent, not on him, but on a weakened, exhausted Tiamat, who had just finished annihilating the last of the giant summons and was now beset by a dozen powerful devil nobles. The snake Sannin saw his chance to remove a powerful piece from the board. Something inside Naruto, some ancient, primal lock, began to crack. He saw these people, this proud dragon, this noble king, this fierce Kage, who had, for their own reasons, chosen to stand by his side. He saw them bleeding for his village. For him, the cold, analytical detachment of his six eyes began to fail, submerged beneath a rising tide of something hot, something visceral. Rage. The final straw was an attack aimed at Artoria. As she struggled to her feet, Tobirama appeared behind her in a flash of speed, his hand wreathed in a water blade, aimed at her heart. No, the roar was not from Naruto's mouth. It was a shockwave that erupted from his very soul. The world went silent. The air grew heavy, thick, charged with an energy so dense it felt like the entire sky was collapsing. A pillar of emerald green light erupted from Naruto, shooting into the heavens and shattering the clouds. The ground for 100 meters around him cracked and split, the very bedrock of Konoha groaning under an impossible pressure. His blonde hair flashed, then bled into a pale, sickly green. His muscles swelled, tearing through his jacket. His pupils vanished, his blue eyes becoming blank, white orbs of pure, malevolent power. The six eyes' intricate pattern was still there, but it was now submerged beneath a sea of incandescent rage. A guttural, inhuman snarl ripped from his throat. The legendary Super Saiyan had been born. His transformation was not glorious. It was not heroic. It was a calamitous, terrifying event. The sheer pressure of his aura was a physical blow. The shinobi and devils closest to him, friend and foe alike, collapsed. Their lungs unable to draw breath. Orochimaru stared, his reptilian face frozen in a mask of pure, ecstatic terror. Yes, yes, this power, it is divine, it is everything I have ever dreamed of. The reanimated Hokage, beings of immense power themselves, stopped their assault, their borrowed bodies trembling before this new, primal god. Artoria, her life saved by the blast of pure energy that had vaporized Tobirama's attack, stared at the being that was once Naruto. By the Grail, she whispered, her voice filled with horrified awe. What is he? The thing that was Naruto turned its head, its blank white eyes fixing on the wood golem that had injured Artoria. It raised a hand. A sphere of green, crackling energy formed in its palm. It didn't throw it. The sphere simply expanded, and the wood golem, a creature that had fought on par with a tailed beast, was not destroyed. It was unmade, erased from existence at a molecular level. Then, it moved. It didn't use a body flicker or a jutsu. It simply vanished, leaving a sonic boom in its wake. It appeared before the reanimated Hashirama. The first Hokage, the god of shinobi, had time to form a single, desperate wooden shield before the green-hued fist slammed into him. The shield, the man, and the 50 meters of forest he had created behind him were obliterated in a single, silent explosion of force. The being turned its gaze towards the battlefield. It saw devils incinerating shinobi. It saw Oto Nin cutting down civilians. It saw destruction, and it saw red. It became a comet of green death. It didn't fight, it exterminated. A wave of its hand, and 100 devils were turned to dust. A casual backhand, and an entire city block filled with enemy shinobi vanished. There was no strategy, no technique. Only overwhelming, absolute, and terrifying power. Tiamat, from across the village, felt the energy spike and froze. That power, she breathed, her own draconic might feeling like a candle in a hurricane. He actually did it. He let the storm loose. The invaders broke. Their morale, their courage, their very sanity shattered before this unstoppable, horrifying force. They tried to flee, but there was no escape. The green demon was everywhere at once, a silent, efficient engine of annihilation. In less than 2 minutes, the entire invading army was gone. Wiped from the face of the earth. The only enemies left were Orochimaru and the 2 regenerating Hokage. The being that was Naruto floated in the sky above the devastated village, its green aura pulsing like a malevolent star. It looked down, its blank gaze falling on the wounded, on the burning buildings, on the destruction. Its rage, its primary fuel source, was gone. But the power remained, a runaway celestial reaction seeking a new target. Its gaze fixed on Konoha itself. This place was the source of his pain, his loneliness, his cage. It had to be cleansed. It raised its hand, a sphere of world-breaking energy gathering in its palm. Larger and more condensed than anything before it. Naruto, stop, Artoria screamed, her voice raw. May, Tiamat, Hiruzen, they all watched in horror, powerless to intervene. They were saved, but their savior was about to become their destroyer. But deep within the storm, a part of Naruto still remained. The 6 eyes, the divine instrument of perception and control, fought against the tide. It saw the fear on Artoria's face. It saw the devastation below. It saw the consequences. With a supreme, agonizing act of will, a final, desperate command, it fought for control. The green energy surrounding him flickered. The world-ending sphere in his hand wavered, destabilized. A scream, this one human, this one filled with agony, tore from his lips. The emerald aura collapsed in on itself, imploding with a silent flash of light that cracked the very sky. Naruto, his hair bleeding back to blonde, his body shrinking back to its normal size, fell from the sky like a stone. He crashed into the center of the village, the impact carving a massive, perfectly circular crater 50 meters wide. He lay at the bottom, unconscious, his clothes shredded, his body battered, but alive. Silence descended upon the broken village. The invasion was over. The enemy was annihilated. Orochimaru, having seen a power far beyond his comprehension, had long since fled. His allies, Tiamat, Artoria, May, Hiruzen, slowly converged on the edge of the crater, staring down at his small, still form. They were safe. Konoha was saved. But as they looked at the devastation around them, and at the boy who had caused it, there was no victory in their hearts. There was only the profound, chilling terror of having witnessed the birth of a god, and the dawning realization that the greatest threat to their world might just be its only savior. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Weight of Infinity. Consciousness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as the slow, reluctant rebooting of a system that had suffered a catastrophic failure. Naruto's first sensation was silence. Not the passive quiet of an empty room, but an active, profound, and absolute silence that seemed to press in on him from all sides. It was a silence with weight and texture. A silence he recognized. He opened his eyes. There was no ceiling, no walls, no floor. Only an endless, luminous, and completely featureless expanse of white. Its street, retched into infinity in every direction, a perfect, sterile void. He was lying on a surface that was indistinguishable from the space around him, yet it was solid and cool beneath his bare back. His clothes were gone, shredded in the transformation, leaving him in only a pair of standard-issue black trousers that were miraculously intact. "You are awake." The voice was a whisper that did not travel through the air but simply appeared in his mind. Ophis stood a few meters away, a single, dark figure in the unending whiteness. Her gothic dress was a stark slash of black against the void, her PR. Essence the only landmark in this sea of nothing. "Where are we?" Naruto asked, his own voice sounding loud and abrasive in the perfect stillness. He sat up, his body aching with a weariness that went deeper than muscle and bone. It was the exhaustion of the soul. "My silence," Ophis replied simply. "A pocket dimension. A space between spaces. The noise in your village was too loud. You needed quiet to process." The memories came rushing back, not as a coherent narrative, but as a chaotic flood of sensory data and raw emotion. The scream of rage, the feeling of his own power shattering its cage, the emerald inferno of his aura, the blank, white-eyed view of the world as he had torn through the invading army. The horrifying, cold logic that had almost led him to annihilate Konoha itself. The terror on Artoria's face. A wave of self-loathing so intense it was physically nauseating washed over him. He curled in on himself, wrapping his arms around his knees. He was a monster, a walking apocalypse. Tiamat had been right to challenge him. Danzo had been right to fear him. The villagers had been right to hate him. His control, the one thing he had prided himself on, the entire foundation of his existence, had failed. He had saved everyone only to become the greatest threat of all. The power you unleashed, Ophis stated, her tone flat and analytical, yet somehow not unkind. It was infinite. You tried to force it into a finite container. The container broke. I almost destroyed everything, Naruto whispered, his voice hoarse. My home, my friends. But you did not, Ophis countered. At the point of perfect infinity, you chose finitude. You chose them. That is, interesting. Before he could respond, a section of the white void shimmered and tore open, forming a swirling, golden portal. From it stepped Artoria Pendragon. She was no longer in her battle-scarred armor, but in a simple blue dress that someone, likely the third Hokage, had procured for her. There were bandages peeking out from her collar and on her arms. Her face was pale, but her emerald eyes were clear and resolute. She saw Naruto curled in on himself, a picture of misery and self-recrimination, and her expression softened with a king's empathy. She walked towards him, her footsteps making no sound in the void. She did not offer a hand or a word of pity. She simply stood before him, her presence a bastion of unwavering dignity. I am told this is a place of healing, she began, her voice formal but gentle. Though it feels more like a prison of the mind. Naruto didn't look up. It's what I deserve. I'm a monster, Artoria. You saw it. Quote, I saw a power I cannot comprehend, she corrected him calmly. And I saw it wielded by a man who, at the final moment, chose to turn that power upon himself. Rather than harm those he had sworn to protect. That is not the act of a monster. It is the act of a king. He finally looked up at her, his blue eyes clouded with pain. A king. I lost control. I almost. Do you believe a king's crown is light? She asked, her voice taking on a new gravity. Do you think a true monarch has never felt the desire to burn their own kingdom to the ground in a moment of despair or rage? Power is a burden, Naruto. The greater the power, the heavier the burden. Your power is that of a god. The weight must be unimaginable. She knelt before him, bringing herself to his level. When I drew Caliburn from the stone, I bound my own humanity to the fate of my kingdom. I sacrificed my own heart for the sake of my people. I thought it was the only way. I built walls around myself, and in the end, my kingdom fell anyway. I learned a hard lesson. Control that comes from caging your heart is an illusion. True control, true kingship, comes from accepting the burden, from mastering your own soul. Not from denying it. She looked at him, her gaze intense and full of a profound understanding. You are not a monster to be caged. You are a king who must learn to rule his own inner kingdom. That rage, that terrifying power, it is a part of your domain. You cannot cast it out. You must face it, understand it, and bend it to your will. Not through fear, but through command. It is the heaviest crown ever forged, but you do not have to bear it alone. Her words did not erase his guilt, but they reframed it. She did not see him as a beast. She saw him as a fellow sovereign, struggling with a burden she could, in her own way, understand. She wasn't afraid of him. She was challenging him to be better, to be stronger in a way that had nothing to do with physical might. He gave a slow, shaky nod, a silent acknowledgement of her wisdom. Artoria, seeing she had said what needed to be said, gave him a small, encouraging smile, stood, and walked back through her portal, leaving him with the resonating weight of her words. He was left in the silence for a long time, contemplating the idea of his power as a kingdom to be ruled. It was a daunting, almost impossible thought. Before he could spiral back into despair, the void tore open once more. This time, the portal was a swirling mist, and from it stepped Terumi. She was dressed in the formal blue robes of the Mizukage, her expression a careful blend of official concern and genuine warmth. She held a small, steaming cup in her hand. "I had a feeling you'd be awake," she said, her voice the smooth, charming alto he remembered. "And I suspected Ophis Chan's hospitality, while appreciated, might be lacking in certain amenities." "Green tea." She placed the cup on the white floor beside him. He stared at it, a simple, mundane object in this place of infinite abstraction. It was grounding. "Thank you," he murmured. May sat down, not with the formal posture of a cage, but with a tired grace, tucking her legs to the side. "I just came from a council meeting with your Hokage. The world is in an uproar. Reports of the Golden Demon of Konoha, who single-handedly annihilated an invading army, are spreading like wildfire. Some are calling you a savior. Others are demanding your classification as a world-level threat to be eliminated." Naruto flinched. "They're not wrong. Don't be ridiculous," May said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "A weapon is a tool. It has no will. You have a will, Naruto-kun. And at the critical moment, your will was to protect. The world can think what it wants. What matters is what your allies think. And Kurigakure stands with you." She took a breath, her gaze softening. "When you saved me from the 7 swordsmen, I saw your power. I admit, my first thought was pragmatic. Your strength could protect my village, guarantee its future. But then I saw the struggle in your eyes. I saw the control it took for you to wield that power without losing yourself. And during this invasion, I saw what happens when that control slips." She looked at him directly, her green eyes searching his. "Am I afraid of that power? Yes. Anyone with a sense of self-preservation would be. But I am not afraid of you. Because I have seen the man who wields the power. The man who bleeds for others. The man who carries the weight of the world and still takes the time to see. Create a silly little energy fox for a child in a garden." Her words were a balm on his raw nerves. She wasn't speaking to the king or the god. She was speaking to him, Naruto. She acknowledged the weapon but chose to see the man. "The world will always fear what it doesn't understand," she concluded, her voice firm. "Let them. A little fear can be a useful political tool. What matters is that you don't start fearing yourself. You are not a monster, Naruto. You are our most powerful, and most precious, ally. Don't you dare forget that." She gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze, stood up, and walked back to her misty portal. "Get some rest. The world of politics is messy. We'll need your clear head soon enough." The portal closed, leaving Naruto with the warmth of the tea spreading through his hands. She offered him not a philosophical challenge, but a practical one. Acceptance of his role on the world stage. A political anchor in the storm of his own power. The next tear in reality was far less graceful. A jagged rip of blue and gold energy appeared, and Tiamat strode through, her arms crossed, a scowl on her face. "Still moping," she grunted, her voice echoing in the void. "I thought you were made of sterner stuff. Little maelstrom." Naruto looked up at her, his expression weary. "You of all people should understand, Tiamat. I almost became a mindless engine of destruction. Almost," she snorted, dismissing the word with a wave of her clawed hand. "Almost doesn't count. I've, almost, leveled continents in a fit of pique. Power like ours is not a gentle stream, boy. It is a volcano. It erupts. The key is not to stop the eruption, that's impossible. The key is to learn to aim the lava." She began to pace, her energy a restless, crackling storm. "When I saw you transform, I admit, I was impressed. You finally stopped trying to choke your power and let it breathe. It was magnificent. And yes, it was terrifying. And yes, you lost control. So what?" She stopped and glared down at him. "Do you think I was born with perfect mastery over chaos karma? I raged. I destroyed. I made mistakes that cost others dearly. Power requires practice. A blade is not sharp until it is ground against the stone. Your first true unleashing was messy. Of course it was. Now you have a baseline. You know what it feels like. You know where the breaking point is." Her expression turned deadly serious. "So this is what we are going to do. Your self-pity is boring and unproductive. When you are ready, you and I are going to have a real fight. Not a spar, a fight. You will transform again, and I will beat you down until you learn to think inside the storm. I will be your whetstone. I will force you to master that form, because I, Tiamat, will not have an ally who is afraid of his own shadow. I require a partner who is my equal in strength and will. Is that clear?" Her words were harsh, brutal, and completely devoid of sympathy. And they were exactly what he needed to hear. It wasn't philosophy or politics. It was a direct, practical, actionable plan. A challenge. She wasn't just offering support, she was demanding his improvement. She saw his ultimate power not as a curse to be feared, but as a weapon to be sharpened. "It's clear," Naruto said, a flicker of his old resolve returning to his eyes. "Good," Tiamat grunted, a flicker of a pleased smirk on her lips. She turned and strode back through her portal, leaving him with a clear, if terrifying, path forward. He was left alone for what felt like an eternity, the words of a king, a cage, and a dragon coalescing in his mind. Duty, acceptance, mastery, 3 pillars upon which to rebuild his shattered confidence. A new disturbance, this one subtle, a slight warping of the white space behind him. He didn't need to turn. He had felt her watching. "You're very popular, Naruto-kun," Naya Tilda, Kuroka purred, emerging from a ripple of shadows. She sauntered over, her twin tails swaying, and plopped down beside him with a distinct lack of decorum. "A king, a queen, and a dragon all lining up to give you pep talks. You've collected quite the menagerie." "Kuroka," he acknowledged, his voice tired. "Don't mind me," she said, leaning back on her hands. "I just wanted a front row seat. It was quite the fireworks show. That green-eyed rage, it was beautiful. Pure, honest, and delightfully destructive." He frowned. "You think what I became was beautiful?" "Of course," she chirped. "Everyone is so afraid of their own monsters. They hide them, chain them up, pretend they don't exist. You let yours out to play. You showed everyone your fangs. There's an honesty in that which I admire." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "I've been called a monster my whole life, Naruto-kun. It's not so bad. Once you stop fighting it, you realize that being a monster just means you don't have to play by anyone else's rules." Her perspective was, like everything about her, chaotic and self-serving, yet it held a grain of truth. She offered him an acceptance of his darkest self, a temptation to embrace the monster instead of fighting it. "That is not a path I will walk," Naruto said firmly. Kuroka just giggled. "We'll see. But know this. When all your noble friends finally get scared off by the beast, I'll still be here. I've always had a soft spot for strays." She gave his cheek a playful lick, and then dissolved back into the shadows, leaving behind the lingering scent of wild berries and danger. He was finally alone again. Or rather, alone with Ophis. He looked at the last, silent observer. "And you, what do you think?" Ophis drifted closer, her small form seeming to absorb the light around her. She reached out a pale, delicate hand and gently touched his chest, right over his heart where the nexus of his power resided. Her touch was cold, like deep space. "They all speak of your power," she said, her voice a thought in his mind. "They see it as a storm, a weapon, a burden, a beast." She paused, her dull eyes looking into his. "They are wrong." Her next words shifted his entire understanding of himself, a conceptual realignment more powerful than any a dragon or king could offer. "It is not your power. It is you. The storm is not in you. You are the storm. The rage is not a beast you cage. You are the rage. The infinity is not a weight you carry. You are the infinity." She tilted her head. "You are not a finite container that broke. You are an infinite being who is learning the shape of its own existence. You did not almost destroy your home. You chose to give it form. Your choice is what defines your shape. That is all." The world tilted on its axis. He wasn't a man with a monster inside. He was a being of infinite potential, and his humanity, his connections, his hoises, they were the things that gave him a finite, recognizable form. He had not lost control. He had simply chosen to be something else for a moment, and then he had chosen to be himself again. The guilt did not vanish. But the self-loathing did. It was replaced by a terrifying, awesome, and profound sense of responsibility. He looked at Ophis, this strange, silent being from beyond the veil, and felt a wave of gratitude. She had given him the final, most important key. He stood up, his body no longer aching with the phantom pains of guilt. His eyes were clear, his resolve forged anew in the crucible of his despair and tempered by the loyalty of his strange, powerful, and mismatched family. "Ophis," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Take me back. There's work to be done." Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. A Pantheon of Pawns. The week following Naruto's apotheosis and subsequent recovery was one of eerie tranquility in Konoha. The physical scars on the village were healing with breathtaking speed, a testament to the combined efforts of Hashirama's lingering wood-style constructs and the tireless work of the shinobi population. The emotional scars, however, ran far deeper. A new kind of fear permeated the village, not the old, simmering hatred of the Jinchuriki, but a new, profound awe and terror of the being who had saved them. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer a pariah or a hero, he was a fact of nature. As respected and feared as the sky, the sea, or the turning of the seasons. Naruto himself had changed. The quiet boy had become a man of profound stillness. The self-doubt that had plagued him was gone, replaced by a calm, unshakable certainty. The experience in Ophis's void, the counsel of his allies, had not lessened his power's weight, but had taught him how to bear it. He now understood that he was not a man containing a storm, he was the storm, and his humanity was the conscious choice to give that storm purpose and direction. He convened his council. The meeting was not held in the Hokage Tower, but in the deep, heavily sealed chamber of the Uzumaki clan's old shrine within Konoha, a place of ancestral power that felt appropriate for the gravity of their purpose. The attendees were a testament to the new political reality he had forged. Mei Terumi, the Godime Mizukage, sat with the poised authority of a world leader. Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, leaned against a wall, her arms crossed. Her draconic power a coiled serpent beneath her skin, her gaze on Naruto now holding a fierce, unwavering loyalty. Artoria Pendragon, the Night King, stood straight and tall, her presence a pillar of honor and duty, her armor gleaming in the low light of the ceiling lamps. Yusaka, the Queen of Kyoto, attended via a flawless, solid light projection, her 9 tails swaying gently behind her. Her expression serene but serious. And Ophis, the Ouroboros dragon, sat in a corner, a patch of quiet shadow, her very existence a quiet anchor to the infinite. Naruto stood before them at the head of a large stone table. "I have called you all here for a single purpose," he began, his voice calm and clear, commanding the attention of the assembled powerhouses. The invasion of Konoha was not an isolated event. It was the latest in a series of incidents that I believe are connected. Artoria's arrival in this world, Tiamat's quest for her stolen essence, even my own birth and the sealing of the Kyuubi. These are not random acts of chaos. They are carefully orchestrated moves in a game we did not know we were playing. A heavy silence filled the room. The implications of his statement were staggering. "You believe someone has been manipulating us?" Mei asked, her sharp political mind immediately grasping the terrifying scope of his suggestion. "For what purpose? That is what we are here to determine," Naruto said. "Each of you holds a piece of the puzzle. We will assemble them now." He turned first to the projection of the Yukai Queen. "Yusaka Dono, let us begin at the beginning." "With me." Yusaka nodded, her expression somber. "In the oldest of our archives, there are fragments of a prophecy, dating back to the dawn of the age of shinobi. It speaks not of a child of prophecy, but of a cosmic alignment. It foretells that when a star-born soul, a being with power not of this world, was bound to the greatest terrestrial rage of this planet, a catalyst would be created. A being capable of shattering the old order and forcing a new age. The star-born soul, my Saiyan heritage," Naruto murmured, the pieces clicking into place. "And the greatest terrestrial rage, Kurama. The Kyuubi attack wasn't just a disaster. It was the deliberate creation of a prophesied being." Next, he turned to Artoria. "Your arrival, I have thought on this constantly," the Night King said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "The summoning ritual that brought me here was flawed, chaotic. I believed it to be the work of an incompetent magus. But your perception," she glanced at Naruto, "and Yusaka Dono's expertise in mystical arts, have shown me the truth. The flaws were intentional. The ritual was not designed to summon just any heroic spirit. It was specifically engineered to pull me, a king defined by duty and a strict moral code, from the throne of heroes and deposit me in your path. A moral compass," Tiamat grunted from the corner, her golden eyes narrowed in thought. Whoever did this didn't just want you to have power, they wanted to influence how you would learn to use it. They gave the loaded gun a conscience. Naruto nodded, then fixed his gaze on the Dragon King. Your stolen essence, Tiamat. Tiamat's expression darkened with ancient fury. The betrayal of Bahamut Prime, the dragon god of order. He stole a part of my essence, my chaos karma, and sealed it away. I spent millennia consumed by rage, believing he did it for his own power. But his actions were illogical. He was a being of absolute law. His betrayal was an act of pure chaos. A complete contradiction of his being. She looked at Naruto, a new, dawning horror in her eyes. He was a pawn. Someone forced or tricked him into creating a problem, a magically seal. D-vault containing my essence, that only a being with your specific, paradoxical energy signature could resolve. It was an engineered trial. A test designed to force us together, to temper your power against mine. The pattern was becoming terrifyingly clear. Each event was a deliberate stepping stone in Naruto's development. His creation, his moral guidance, his trial by fire. Mei spoke next, her voice grim. This fits with what my intelligence network has gathered about the invasion. Orochimaru has always been an opportunist, but this alliance with a faction of devils was too clean, too sudden. He was given resources, transportation magic, intelligence on Konoha's barrier weaknesses, far beyond his own network. He was not the mastermind. He was simply the most convenient, high-profile pawn to be used for the final critical test. To push you to your absolute limit and force the awakening of your ultimate power. The puzzle was assembled. A shadowy manipulator had been cultivating Naruto since birth, carefully curating the events of his life to forge him into a perfect weapon, a perfect catalyst. We have the what and the how, Artoria said, her voice cold as steel. We are missing the who and the why. That, Naruto said, turning to Ophis, is the final piece. Ophis, who had been silent until now, met his gaze. Yusaka, understanding his intent, focused her energy, her projection glowing as she linked her mystical senses with the raw, dimensional power of the Ouroboros dragon. We need to see the puppet master, Naruto commanded. Ophis, give us a window. The small girl raised her hand. The air in the center of the room shimmered, not tearing this time, but coalescing into a liquid-like mirror of pure darkness. It was a scrying pool made from the fabric of the dimensional gap itself. Guide me, Ophis whispered, her mind linked with Naruto's. He closed his eyes, his 6 eyes focusing not outward, but inward, on the faint, residual traces of the manipulative energy he had felt woven through all these events. It was a faint, alien signature, a thread of cosmic wrongness. He fed this perception to Ophis, who used it as a targeting coordinate for her dimensional sight. The black mirror swirled. Images flashed across its surface with dizzying speed. They saw a brief, chaotic glimpse of the underworld's capital, where the Devil Kings were in an uproar over the annihilation of the rogue faction. They saw a flash of silver light from a high-tech chamber in the Grigori headquarters, where a frantic Azazel was analyzing the impossible energy readings from Konoha. They saw a glimpse of a great, golden hall in Asgard, where a one-eyed Odin stood before the well of Mimir, his expression grim as he observed a new, terrifying thread weaving itself into the tapestry of fate. All the great powers of the world were reacting, confused and alarmed. They were not the enemy. They were just more spectators. Deeper, Naruto urged, pushing his perception further, following the faint thread back to its source. Beyond their pantheons, beyond this reality's sphere, the image in the mirror stabilized. The view it showed was one of breathtaking, terrifying alienness. It was a throne room. But it was not built of stone or metal. It seemed to be constructed from solidified concepts, pillars of frozen time, a floor of shimmering probability, and a high, vault ceiling that looked like a captured nebula. On a massive, brutalist throne carved from a shard of fractured reality sat a being. Its form was indistinct, constantly shifting, as if reality itself could not agree on its shape. At times it looked humanoid, at others like a creature of impossible geometry. Its presence radiated an ancient, cold, and utterly dispassionate intelligence. This was not a god of passion or ambition like those of the known mythologies. This was something older, something from outside. The architect. The being spoke, its voice not a sound but a wave of pure thought that washed over them, chilling them to the core. It was not speaking to them, but musing to itself, reviewing its grand project. Less than project. Catalyst is a success, greater than the thought echoed. Less than the subject, Naruto Uzumaki has achieved the pre-designated, legendary, state. The synchronization of the divergent power sources, the primal Saiyan ki and the divine six eyes, is complete. The primary function can now be initiated. Greater than. A wave of understanding flowed from the being's mind, a data dump of its entire motivation. They saw the universe from its perspective, a stagnant pond of predictable, cyclical conflicts. Angels, devils, gods, humans, all locked in an endless, boring dance. It had grown tired of the predictability. It desired change, true chaos, the kind of violent, unpredictable evolution that only comes from introducing an apex predator into a closed ecosystem. It had orchestrated everything. The prophecy was a seed it had planted millennia ago. The Kyuubi attack was the careful application of force and trauma. Artoria was a calculated injection of morality. Tiamat's stolen treasure was a perfectly designed whetstone. The invasion was the final, percussive shock needed to awaken the final form. Naruto was its masterpiece. Its perfect, beautiful, world-breaking pawn, created for a single purpose, to shatter the board and all the old pieces with it, forcing the birth of a new, more interesting game. The scrying mirror dissolved, plunging the room back into silence. The five powerful women stared at the empty space, their minds reeling from the sheer, cosmic arrogance of the revelation. They were not just participants in their own lives, they had been meticulously crafted props in a drama directed by an alien god. Artoria's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists, her entire being vibrating with a righteous fury. Our struggles, our honor, my kingdom's fall, it was all just a story written for its amusement. Tiamat was trembling, a low, guttural growl rumbling in her chest. The betrayal that had defined her existence was a lie, a tool used to shape another. The humiliation was absolute. I will tear it apart, she seethed. I will rip its throat out with my bare hands. May was pale, her composure shaken. This being, it plays with nations and lives as if they were stones on a go board. The sheer scale of it. Yusaka's projection flickered with distress. To view all of creation as a toy, it is the ultimate blasphemy. Naruto, however, was perfectly still. He felt no rage, no fear. The revelation did not break him. It clarified everything. The contradictions of his life, the endless suffering, the impossible luck, it all snapped into a single, cohesive, and infuriating picture. His emotion was singular, cold, and pure. Focus. He looked at the powerful, furious, and terrified women around him. He saw their strength, their pride, their will. They were not pawns. It thinks of us as its tools, Naruto said, his quiet voice cutting through their anger and despair, drawing all eyes to him. It engineered a catalyst to shatter the world's balance. It has succeeded. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. We are that catalyst. He looked at each of them in turn, the Night King, the Mizukage, the Dragon King, the Yukai Queen, the Dragon God. But we are not its champions. We are not its pawns. We are a new piece on the board. An independent variable it did not calculate. It has given me this power to serve its purpose. He held up a hand, and a small, intensely bright sphere of golden energy, a miniature sun, ignited in his palm. I will use this power for ours. He stood to his full height, and though he was just a boy in his teens, he seemed to command the room with the authority of an emperor who had ruled for 1,000 years. As of this moment, we are no longer just allies of convenience, bound by circumstance. We are a sovereign power. A new faction, united by a single, absolute truth. Our destinies are our own. His gaze was hard as diamond. The architect wanted a war to break the world. We will give it one. But we will not be fighting its battles. We will bring the war to its doorstep. The air in the room crackled. With power as the five women stood in unison, their individual rage and despair coalescing into a single, unified purpose. They were no longer the manipulated. They were the insurgency. Artoria's righteous fury, Tiamat's vengeful pride, May's political will, Yusaka's protective spirit, and Ophis's infinite power, all of it, now aligned behind him. Behind their chosen leader, the architect had wanted to shatter the old world order. It had succeeded beyond its wildest dreams. It had not just created a catalyst. It had created its own executioner, and given him a royal court of warrior queens to see the sentence carried out. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dragon Emperor of the Six Paths. The air in the Uzumaki shrine was not still, it was coiled. The aftermath of the revelation had not brought despair, but a sharp, unified, and terrifying focus. The 5 most powerful women Naruto had ever known, beings who commanded nations, armies, and the very fabric of magic, stood with him not as allies of convenience, but as a sworn war council. Their individual fury had been smelted in the heat of the truth and forged into the cold, hard steel of a singular purpose. It believed it could write our destinies, Artoria said, her voice low and resonant, her hand resting on the wrist of Excalibur. It will now learn that we are the authors of its ending. I have spent millennia dreaming of revenge against a fellow dragon. Tiamat growled, a predatory light dancing in her golden eyes. The prospect of tearing apart a self-proclaimed god is infinitely more satisfying. May, ever the strategist, was already thinking several steps ahead. A direct assault is suicidal, regardless of our power. We know nothing of its true capabilities beyond reality manipulation. On its home ground, it is a true god, Yasaka's projection added. Her expression grim. It controls the laws of its own domain. To fight it there is to fight the very concept of its existence. They all looked to Naruto. He had been silent, his 6 eyes closed as he processed the torrent of information, his mind a whirlwind of strategic calculation. When he opened them, they were clear, calm, and held the unnerving author. Ity of a man who had already seen the path to victory. You are all correct, he stated. We cannot fight it in its realm. We cannot fight it in ours, as it would risk the very reality we seek to protect. He looked at Ophis, who had remained silent and still. Which is why we will not fight it in any realm at all. We will fight it in the space between them. We will make the battlefield a place with no laws, no rules, and no master. Ophis tilted her head. The dimensional gap. Its chaos will be our shield, Naruto confirmed. It cannot manipulate the laws of a place that has none. There, it will be just a being of immense power. And so will we. There, the fight will be fair. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Tiamat's face. Fairness. A novel concept. I like it. Then the plan is made, Artoria declared, her voice ringing with the conviction of a king on the eve of battle. We go now. We give it no more time to scheme. There were no grand farewells, no tearful goodbyes. Their purpose was too immense. Their resolve too absolute. May and Yasaka ensured their nations were secure, their most trusted subordinates given command in their absence. Artoria and Tiamat stood ready, their power thrumming like engines of war. Kuroka, who had been listening from the shadows of the shrine, emerged with a grin, her tails swishing. Don't leave me out of the fun, Naya Tilda. A god hunt Sue. NDS like a perfect way to spend the afternoon. Naruto gave a slight nod of acceptance. He would need every asset. Ophis, he commanded gently. The dragon god of infinity stepped forward. She did not create a simple portal this time. She placed her hands together, and the very air in the shrine began to unravel, pulling apart to reveal the raw, chaotic energy of the space between worlds. It was not a door, it was a stable, protected corridor, a tunnel bored directly through madness, a feat that perhaps only she could accomplish. It is ready, she whispered. One by one, they stepped through. The journey was a sensory assault. They moved through a tunnel of swirling, impossible colors and non-Euclidean geometry. They saw silent, cosmic explosions, the birth and death of pocket universes, and great, Leviathan-like creatures of the gap that swam through the chaos, beings that would have driven lesser mortals insane. Naruto's 6 eyes protected their minds from the worst of the psychic pressure. A lighthouse in an ocean of infinite madness. They emerged into a vast, open expanse of the gap. Below them, a structure that defied physics floated in the void, the architect's throne room. It looked fragile, almost insignificant, in the face of the raw, untamed chaos that surrounded it. It knows we are here, Artoria stated, her instinct flaring. As if in response, the being on the throne turned its shifting, conceptual head towards them. Its voice washed over them once more. not with anger, but with a sense of detached, academic curiosity. Less than the experiment has breached containment. Fascinating. You have chosen to confront your creator. A classic, if predictable, denouement. Your defiance is the final, perfect data point. Come then, my catalyst. Let us conclude this grand design. Greater than. We are not your design. Tiamat roared, and with a beat of her wings, she shot towards the throne room, a comet of draconic fury. We are your executioners. The battle had begun. The architect did not retaliate with energy or physical force. As Tiamat charged, it raised a hand, and the concept of betrayal that had haunted the dragon for millennia was amplified 1,000-fold. Her mind was ooted with visions of Bahamut's treachery, her rage turned inward, her attack faltering as she was consumed by her own inner demons. Tiamat, focus. Naruto's voice cut through her mental chaos, his own energy projecting a shield of pure, logical clarity around her mind. It attacks the soul, not the body. Artoria was next. As she prepared to unleash the power of Excalibur, the architect targeted her sense of duty. It tried to warp her kingly honor into a paralyzing weight of failure, showing her visions of a burning Camelot, of all her knights falling, of her own ideals turning to ash. But Naruto was ready. He shielded her with the concept of purpose, reminding her that her new duty, the one she had chosen, was here and now. Its power is conceptual, Naruto broadcasted to all of them. His 6 eyes seeing the source code of the god's attacks. It does not fight, it redefines. Do not let it isolate you in your own minds. Anchor yourselves to each other. With Naruto acting as their psychic shield and command center, the assault began in earnest. It was a battle unlike any ever fought. Mei and Yasaka, their projections now anchored by Ophis's power to exist even in the gap, became a force of creation. Yasaka channeled immense waves of pure, life-giving natural energy, the essence of a living world, a concept anathema to the sterile logic of the architect. Mei, with her peerless skill, molded this energy, combining it with her own jutsu to create massive, sentient golems of lava and life, great elemental beings that stormed the conceptual throne room, their very existe. NCE a defiance of the sterile reality within. Kuroka became a saboteur. She did not attack directly, but wove through the battlefield like a phantom, her mastery of senjutsu allowing her to create pockets of disruptive energy. Dead zones, where the architect's reality-warping power was nullified, creating openings for the others. Artoria and Tiamat became the twin swords of the assault. Freed the conceptual attacks by Naruto's protection, they unleashed their full might. Artoria's Excalibur was no longer just a beam of light, it was the physical manifestation of victory, a concept that actively overwrote the battlefield. Each swing carved a wound of golden certainty into the god's domain. Tiamat's chaos karma was a storm of pure retribution, a fundamental law of cause and effect turned into a weapon. Every bit of suffering the architect had engineered was now being returned to it 100-fold. And Ophis was the battlefield itself. The dragon god of infinity did not fight. She simply was. At Naruto's direction, she would subtly alter the chaotic nature of the gap, stabilizing the space beneath her allies' feet, while causing reality to fray and tear around the architect, turning its own environment against it. They were magnificent, a perfectly synchronized engine of destruction, a council of queens each playing their part, all directed by the flawless perception of the boy at their center. The architect, for the first time in its eons of existence, felt something akin to surprise. Its experiment was not just defying it, it was systematically dismantling it. The logic was failing. The variables were out of control. With a wave of conceptual pressure that buckled the very fabric of the gap, it swept them all aside, a god finally showing a flicker of true power. Less than insufficient. Your combined power is a statistical anomaly, but it is finite. I am the definition. I am the context. You are mere text, and the text can be deleted. Greater than. It focused its entire, immense will on Naruto. It did not attack him with energy or force. It tried to unmake him. To edit his existence out of reality. Naruto felt his body begin to dissolve, his energy unraveling, his very concept being erased. His allies watched in horror, powerless to stop an attack of such a fundamental nature. In that moment, facing absolute dissolution, Naruto did not feel fear. He did not feel rage. He felt a profound sense of calm. He had faced the monster within and had chosen to be himself. Now, he would face the god without and make the same choice. He reached inward, not to the cage, but to the sun. Not to contain it, but to become it. He consciously, deliberately, and with perfect clarity, embraced the storm. The transformation was absolute. It was not the horrifying, uncontrolled eruption from before. An aura of brilliant, pure emerald light erupted from him, a controlled nova that pushed back against the architect's unmaking will. His hair shifted to a noble, regal shade of gold, a color that seemed to absorb and radiate light. His eyes, the 6 eyes, remained. But they no longer just saw reality. They blazed with the power to define it. The intricate blue patterns now glow. Wing with the same emerald fire as his aura. He was not a berserker. He was not a monster. He had combined the infinite potential of the legendary Super Saiyan with the absolute perception and control of the 6 eyes. He was a perfect synthesis. A being of limitless power, guided by a mind that could comprehend infinity. He was the Dragon Emperor of the 6 paths. Less than impossible, greater than the architect projected. A wave of genuine shock rippling through reality. Less than the berserker state should have overridden the control factor. The logic is flawed. Greater than. Your logic was based on a false premise, Naruto's voice echoed, no longer just a sound, but a multi-layered harmonic that resonated with the very structure of the gap. You believed power and control were opposites. But true power is control. He met the architect's will with his own. The god tried to impose the concept of nothingness upon him. Naruto countered it with the absolute, undeniable concept of I am, backed by the infinite energy of his new form. He did not just block the attack, he overrode it. The architect, its primary weapon of conceptual warfare rendered useless, was forced to resort to cruder methods. It gathered the raw, tick energy of the gap and fired a beam of pure anti-reality, an attack that could erase a galaxy. Naruto simply raised a hand. The beam struck his palm and dissipated, its chaotic energy absorbed and assimilated into his own emerald aura. My turn, he said. He did not power up a grand attack. He did not gather energy. He simply drew back his fist. The movement was simple, human. But as he prepared to strike, his allies felt the conceptual weight behind it. It was not just a punch. It was the physical manifestation of every choice he had ever made. The choice to endure the hatred. The choice to trust his friends. The choice to rule his own power. The choice to defy a god. It was the absolute, undeniable concept of free will. He closed the distance in a timeframe that was no longer measurable. His fist, glowing with a gentle emerald light, struck the center of the architect's shifting, chaotic form. There was no sound. There was no explosion. There was only a flash of pure, white light. The architect, a being of pure logic and cold, hard determinism, could not process the illogical, paradoxical concept of a creation defining its own existence in defiance of its creator. The contradiction was absolute. Its form fractured, not into pieces, but into an infinite number of powerless thoughts and ideas, which scattered like dust on the dimensional winds, no longer a coherent or singular being. Its throne room crumbled into nothingness, leaving them floating in the vast, silent chaos of the dimensional gap. The battle was over. They had won. Naruto's emerald aura subsided, his hair returning to its familiar blonde. His form returning to normal. He was exhausted, but he was whole. He was himself. His council, his queens, his family, gathered around him. Tiamat clapped a heavy, proprietary hand on his shoulder. Artoria gave him a nod of profound, kingly respect. May smiled, a look of pure relief and pride on her face. Kuroka winked, a silent, I knew you had it in you. Yasaka's projection shimmered with joy. Ophis, for the first time, had a small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. They had faced a god who played with lives and had won back their right to live them. Epilogue. 6 months later, the pocket dimension created by Ophis was no longer a sterile white void. It had been shaped by their collective wills into a place of impossible, breathtaking beauty. A sprawling estate hung in a sea of stars. Its architecture a harmonious blend of their different worlds. A central keep, with the elegant, sweeping roofs of a Japanese castle, was flanked by wings of noble, gray Arthurian stone. In the distance, a great, crystalline mountain peak rose towards a captured nebula, a perfect eyrie for a dragon. The air was filled with peace. Naruto sat beneath a great, ancient cherry tree in a Zen garden. A cup of tea warming his hands. He watched his new reality, his new family. In a wide, grassy courtyard, Artoria and Tiamat were engaged in a fierce but friendly spar. The noble grace of a knight clashing with the savage power of a dragon, their laughter echoing in the air. On a veranda overlooking the garden, May was in a deep discussion via a communication lacrima. Her expression that of a confident and powerful leader. She was not just the Mizukage anymore, she was the chief diplomat for their new, unnamed faction, a power that now held the respect and fear of every pantheon. Yusaka and her daughter, Kuno, were visiting. They were having a picnic with Kuroka and her younger sister, Kaneko, who had been rescued and brought here to live in safety. Kuroka was still a mischief maker. But her eyes no longer held the desperation of a fugitive. She had found her home. And Ophis, the dragon god of infinity, was curled up fast asleep in a patch of sun at the base of the tree. Her quest for silence finally fulfilled in the happy, peaceful quiet of the home they had all built together. Naruto closed his eyes, feeling the intricate web of connections between them all. They were a chaotic, impossible, and perfect family. His family. He felt a presence beside him and opened his eyes. Artoria, her spar finished, had sat down next to him, her cheeks flushed with exertion. A moment later, Tiamat landed on his other side with a soft thud, her pride now a comfortable, easy confidence. May's meeting ended, and she came to stand behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders. Kuroka and Yusaka joined them, their laughter warm. Ophis stirred, sleepily leaning against his leg. They were all here, together, in a moment of shared peace. "It's a good life," May said softly, her voice full of contentment. "It is the life we chose," Artoria added, her gaze meeting Naruto's. He looked at each of them, at the incredible, powerful, and loving women who had chosen to stand by his side. Who had faced down gods and monsters with him. The architect had intended for him to be a catalyst of destruction, a tool to shatter the world. And in a way, it had succeeded. He had shattered the old world. The old rules, the old fate that had been written for him. And from the pieces, he and the women he loved had built something new. Something better, something of their own choosing. He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached the depths of his soul. "Yes," he said, his voice full of a quiet, unshakable certainty. It is. Chapter 10 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.